afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Hot Mic Podcast. I'm Nathan Ivy, your host, aka Nate the Barbarian. Welcome back, everybody. For those who may be new, Hot Mic is a podcast where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. And hopefully today we can get some really hot topics on. Today I'm joined by Kevin Gordon. How you doing, Kevin? Good to see you, brother.
Good, very good, very good. Very
And
happy.
Raven Mundy. Always good to see you, Raven. How are you? Good to see
Good.
you. Phil Heimlich, grizzled veteran. Good to see you.
I don't like,
And,
excuse me, I don't like the term grizzled. I think that's some kind of age discrimination you're engaging in.
Nah, I'm grizzled too. We're in the same boat.
All right.
We're all
That's
grizzled
okay.
veterans.
You're a young man. If that's okay then.
I'm youngish. Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. And of course, my partner in this endeavor, Kevin Aldridge. How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. Hey, Phil, now that DEI is gone, man, you have no complaint. We can age discriminate, do all sorts of different things, ball discriminate. We can go ahead and take all of that, put all of that on the table, man.
I won't get a note and have to go down to HR
being a
department.
bald grizzly guy or falling on deaf ears,
Yep.
baby. Give it to Trump.
Exactly.
You know, finally we're back to what Kevin Aldridge is always demanding: a merit-based system.
That's right. That's right. You've earned that criticism.
Yes, I
Hair
spent,
club for men, get you some de-ager, do all of that. That's within your power to do that.
I've spent too much time down in the hot mic personnel off HR department. So now that's done. So
Now that's done. So we can all be
Now,
happy.
can I say, if I'm not interrupting, I have to say we've missed our friend Kevin Gordon here, and we're glad to have him back. Though there is a question that's kind of been burning in my mind, Kevin, to ask you. Am I allowed, Mr. Barbarian, to just pose a question? Is that okay? Huh? All right. Now, Kevin, you and I have had very interesting
Spirited.
discussions
Yes.
about, what is a conservative versus what is a liberal, and what is a Republican versus what is a Democrat. Okay, right? I mean, so I've been wanting to ask you, when our President Trump released those 1,500 citizens, 900 of which were convicted or pled guilty to assaulting police officers with various weapons. Now, here's my question. Was his action a conservative action or a liberal action?
well, it's a good question. It depends on, first of all, I wish it would have been done case by case and taken a look at a lot of the things, because I think of those 900 convictions, and Phil, you know this, if you're going for a conviction of somebody and you just want to get it off your plate, you'll give all kinds of charges out there. And then for somebody, and again, we've talked about this before, you only get the amount of justice that you can afford. And somebody can't afford to
I'll
go to
disagree
trial,
with that.
and they'll sign
defenders
something just to get it off
the
their
federal
plate.
public
Hey,
defenders,
let him
the
finish,
federal
let him
public
finish his-
defenders are excellent.
Hey, Phil, let him finish. You
I'm
asked him
sorry,
a
I'm
question.
sorry,
Let
I'm sorry.
let Kevin
Sorry,
get
go
this.
ahead. My
Fine.
apologies.
Now, of the 1,500 or so, I don't know the exact number, but I'm sure there was probably at least maybe 100 that were violent offenders. But for people this, a lot of the stuff that I saw where somebody walks into the Capitol, standing there taking some pictures and then walk back out. Why they were charged with anything, I have no clue. But one of the things is that if you look at the J6 committee, which by the way, they've destroyed all the evidence from that, so you don't know what they talked about, discussed, or whatever. I wish the whole thing would be investigated and we'd know everything about it, from the lack of security there that Nancy Pelosi turned
But
down.
that's not what I'm asking about.
Okay, but
Here's what I'm asking, just to be clear.
there are some that I think probably shouldn't have been pardoned, and I don't like that. But overall, I would say the majority of them, maybe a vast majority, probably should have been. And if you have a problem with that, then you probably have a problem with the pardon that Biden did at the last minute, that guy that murdered in cold blood.
No, I do have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But again, so here's my question, and just for the just to be clear, 900 of them, 900 of the 1,500 were convicted either by pleading guilty or going to trial of violent attacks on police officers?
I don't.
Okay.
I would.
900.
I would love to know each one of those because
Okay,
I don't.
but let's
believe,
even
I
pretend.
don't
Let's
believe it.
even pretend it's 100. Though I don't think the facts bear that out. Whatever the number is, the question I asked you, whatever the number is, was his action in pardoning them a liberal action or a conservative action?
I don't know if you can call it liberal or conservative. It was wipe the slate clean and start all over. So get rid of the past and go forward. But
I thought we were supposed to be law and order. We're conservatives, aren't we? Supposed to be pro-police and law and order?
Yeah, but when you have a hoax, when you have show trials, when you have things that just in order to put a notch in somebody's belt, I think that should be eliminated. And a lot of those prosecutions were political in nature. And quite honestly, I would love to know.
Why did they plead guilty, or why did they?
Phil, I would love to know. I would love to know how many of those people followed FBI informants or FBI agents into that building and followed their lead.
0. We already know.
No, we don't.
We got the answer. 0.
No, we don't.
But you still haven't answered my question. Okay, you're saying it's not necessarily liberal.
I don't want to get in the middle. Y'all, this is good. Y'all have y'all conversation.
He answered your question, Phil. But I think what is interesting here, and what I love about this conversation, and let's apply this across the board, because I think what I hear Kevin trying to say in some ways, and I think many of us would agree with this, is that there's a difference between law and order and justice, which is what Kevin seems to be suggesting here in terms of what he's saying is, I can say that I'm law and order, but when I see injustice, that doesn't always apply to the textbook definition of law and order. And so what I think is interesting is that this is a position that many African Americans take in many situations where we are categorized when we protest things as lawless, or not in favor of law and order, when we're saying kind of the same thing that Kevin is saying here, is if you look at these things on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes you look beneath the surface and you investigate, and how many times are Black defendants overcharged and can't afford defense and get crap public defenders, or I shouldn't say crap public defenders, or public defenders who are underpaid and overworked representing their cases, and they wind up in jail. So all of the things that Kevin is saying about some of these J6 defendants, and there may be some in that do fit that criteria, Kevin. I'm not going to say that they're not. But let's apply that same lens to when marginalized groups cry the same thing.
Oh, exactly. I have no problem with that, Kevin. And as a matter of fact, I think that some of these, unfortunately, and Phil, you're going to take offense to this, but sometimes I think prosecutors are more interested in how many notches they can have on the bedpost or their cane or whatever the hell they keep track of. They would much rather have a victory than and make sure that they're talking about how great law and order people they are. And I think there's a lot of times when they overcharge somebody just so that they'll take a plea deal and get it off the record. I've seen a lot of these cases, and I've seen a lot of instances where somebody's charged and they say, I just can't, disrupting my life. I mean, look at the hell. I mean, just look at Daniel Penny. Look at the hell he went through for how many years, somewhere he never should have been charged there.
He should be in jail right now.
What?
I said Daniel Penny should be in jail right now.
Absolutely not. But apparently, see, that's where you're looking at something from a different lens, and I'm
looking at the lens of he choked an innocent man out. Who did
no, he didn't. The guy was alive when they took him away. He died later. He didn't choke him.
The man out. The medical coroner in that case said that he died directly because of the asphyxiation, the pressure that Daniel applied. Daniel should be in jail right now. Instead, he's getting new jobs and he's Trump's new friend.
We're just going to have to agree to disagree on some of those things.
Absolutely.
I think if there's if of the J6 defendants, I refuse to believe that 900 of them were violent felons or violent. Now, there were cases where some cops were beaten and sprayed with mace and some of that sort of stuff. Those things, those people should have been prosecuted. But quite honestly, if you go back, I mean, how many people have been charged with murder in New York and different places around the country, and they're given cashless bail and they're out on the street and they're not even charged? So
cashless bail for murder, I've never seen my whole life, ever.
Well, Just look at some of the cases in New York, my friend.
For murder? You're saying people are being released on cashless bail for murder?
Yeah. Some of these people that thrown people
show
into
me
the
one.
subway.
Next show, assuming we're both on, you bring that to me because I've never seen it, never heard of it, never seen it.
Well, I'm not going to do your homework.
It definitely ain't black. We know that.
By the way, I know
making the assertion, so it's not fair to say do my homework.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to make the assertion that if what Kevin G has said is correct, that there's people out there that committed murder and they're out on like cash bond or whatever, cashless bonds, they're probably not black. I might be on a limb, but if that's true, which I doubt it is, they're probably not.
I'll take some time
black.
and I'll look it up because there isn't. You look at some of the people that have been released in New York and Chicago, and I mean, where are the countless convictions from the people in 2020 during the summer of love and the number of police officers that were killed during that peaceful demonstration during that year?
Committed crimes in those instances have been brought to justice.
No, they haven't.
They've been yes, they have. And but here is for sure. But here's my question when I hear people like Kevin saying like, I just know that somebody, you never have any specific names and examples. Like, give me one name and example of somebody who was convicted on January 6th and they shouldn't have been.
I'll dig those up, but
But shouldn't you have at least one readily available?
Right. Off the top of my head, I have watched some of the interviews and I've listened to some of the people that were just, I don't know their names off the top of my head. I can look that up, but where they've talked about the way that they were prosecuted and the fact that up until these pardons were issued, that the FBI were still trying to go through the various tapes and try to identify anybody they could that was even on the grounds so that they could chase them down. Not the FBI. Not the pictures of the people that were beating cops or spraying cops or any of that sort of stuff.
Oh, those were the easy ones.
And quite honestly, Nathan, I would love to match every one of those pictures that somebody beating a cop with the conviction of and I will be willing to bet. I guarantee that there is probably somebody's trying to call me here. I guarantee you that there's probably on video somebody beating a cop that was probably one of those FBI informants.
That wouldn't even make any sense.
Or a member of Antifa.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. I just love it when I hear you guys defending January 6th, but you never have any evidence. It's always, I believe, there's a hunch, and you never have any specific examples. So,
all right. Next week, I'll give you examples. Okay.
I don't want to give you. That's an impossible task. I don't want to give you impossible homework. So if you want to do that, you do that. But there's no way you're going to be able to prove that because it's just not true.
All right.
And I know Kevin.
Can I just ask a brief question? Because I really want to I want to poke Kevin's brain just for a little bit. Kevin, do you at all believe that there were any conservatives present at the January 6th, what I refer to as an insurrection, but I'm sure you don't refer to it as that. But is there anything in you at all that believes that there were conservatives present who broke the law?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there were. But I also looked at I've looked at a lot of video of that day, and I saw several instances where Capitol Police were removing barriers and directing people and saying, head this way or head this way. That
at the beginning.
That QAnon shaman, if you watch some of the video there, he was actually led around by like 3 Capitol Police officers.
Didn't he plead guilty?
What?
Didn't he plead guilty?
I guess yes, he did.
Okay.
But he was led around by these
He's a bad example.
Okay. No, it's not, Nathan.
If the man pled guilty, he's a bad example.
He did not attack anybody. As a matter of fact, these Capitol Police officers were directing him around, showing him different places and pointing this out, pointing that out, and pointing this out. If they were so afraid of him, why weren't they trying? And he was by himself. There was nobody else around him. If they were so fearful for their lives, why didn't they arrest him right then and there? So this whole J6
Who knows?
thing,
maybe the video that you saw and you're speaking of was before the violent part of the insurrection.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Well, maybe it wasn't before the violent part, and maybe the shaman didn't do anything violent. Okay.
Well, that
Do
can't
you
be
have
true
any?
because
Do you
he
have any
pled
proof
guilty.
of anything that he did? You have
He pled
any
guilty.
video of him doing something violent?
He pled guilty.
One more question. If
Yeah,
a police officer pulls you over for a traffic stop, he asks you to in the midst of him giving you instructions as police do during a traffic stop, if he asks you to do something illegal, are you still going to have to pay the consequences for that illegal act in a court of law?
Who pay the? Who pays the?
You, if an officer in the midst of a traffic stop asks you to do something that is illegal, that is against the law, and you do it in a court of law, are you still held liable or accountable for breaking the law?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If you're pulled over for a traffic stop, what would the police officer ask you to do that's
I'm just
illegal?
asking hypothetically. If you are pulled over at a traffic stop and an officer asks you to do something
Give me an
illegal
example.
or against the law,
Give me an example.
I don't know. If you get pulled over for a traffic stop and the officer asks you to, I don't know, hold his gun for him or something like that. I don't know. But if he asks you to do something illegal during a traffic stop and you do it when you are arrested or charged with that crime, you're still
You better
held
damn sure
accountable
make
for
sure
that.
and that's why a lot of these cops now have these body cams to eliminate some of this confusion and stuff. I don't know if can you name
The point that I'm trying to make by
can you
asking the
name an
question is,
instance where something like that, where a cop would go up to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm pulling you over because you were speeding. Here, hold my gun so I can shoot you." I mean,
my
what?
point, that was just a situation that I used to make the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is, if you are instructed, even by an officer of the law, to break the law, I could be wrong, and Phil, you have a law degree, so maybe you can correct me. But are you not still liable or held accountable for breaking the law, even if an officer tells you to do so, or instructs you to do so, or gives you the opportunity to do so? You still broke the law. You're still a criminal. You were still convicted of the law that you broke. What are we debating?
You'd have to give me a specific example of somebody or cop ordering somebody to break the law. That
You get what she's saying.
I'll give you.
No,
I'll
I
give you
don't.
an example. I'll give you an example. There is a absolute duty that a prosecutor, and you can get disbarred if you don't do this. You have an absolute duty to turn over not only any evidence that you intend to use at trial, but any evidence that could help the defendant. You have an absolute duty to turn it over, and when you don't, you get in huge amount of trouble. Now, and this may fit in with what Raven's saying, I'm not sure, but the example about the shaman. Now, you're saying there's video that shows they just let him in. I can promise you, if that video existed and it would have been given to the shaman, and he showed that at trial, he would have been found not guilty, okay? But instead, he was either tried or he pled guilty, which is why I tend to, with all due respect, Kevin, suspect that maybe what you're saying about, they just let him in, probably isn't true, because I would say that video would have been a clear defense, so there's no reason why he would have pled guilty.
Well, Phil, why then have there been several instances of where somebody has been convicted of a crime, and then we find out years later or a couple years, whenever, that there was information withheld by the prosecutor? Can you name me one prosecutor that has ever been disbarred as a result of that?
Absolutely. I'll give you just one quick example. In fact, this guy went to jail. You guys remember the Duke Lacrosse case where those guys were, it turns out, unjustly charged with accused of rape and all, and that prosecutor there not only lost his, because he withheld evidence, not only lost his license, they actually went to jail for a couple of days. Okay, so
wow, a couple of days, even though he by withholding evidence would have ruined these kids' life for the rest of their life. They would have been charged with rape and convicted of rape, which they would have been in jail for what?
Well, the reason
he gets what, 2 days? Whoa, that's justice, Phil.
You asked me. I didn't say justice. You asked me if there's a case where a prosecutor.
That's some serious jail time, man.
There's no. All right. Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, you asked me for a case where a prosecutor was caught doing it, and I gave you one.
I would say that's a BS case, an example.
Because you don't like it?
If that prosecutor withheld evidence and somebody was charged with rape and could have possibly gone to jail.
Not a crime. It's not a crime.
Withholding evidence?
It's a disbarable offense. But if a prosecutor,
well, how convenient! How convenient! The attorneys that write the laws exclude themselves from something.
That's why he didn't go to jail for a long time. That's the law.
That's so wonderful.
I'm not saying the law's right. I'm just saying it is. You can be disbarred and sanctioned.
Oh, big deal. Woo.
Yeah. I think I understand your point, Raven. I think it's a good point, but let's move on here. So,
well, I don't understand the point of the question.
Trying to make is
what
you said.
What? Give me an example of where a cop has asked somebody to do, or
that's not even it.
I don't have to provide an example because I said that it was a hypothetical. How would I be able to provide an example for a hypothetical situation, Kevin?
Well, on a hypothetical situation, I don't know that you can have an answer to a hypothetical that's not happened or that you don't have an example of.
That's the point of a hypothetical. Oh, never mind. We can move on.
I think the point she was trying to make, Kevin, is that you said that somebody opened the door for the QAnon shaman. And I know that Kevin A has made this point before. And that is just because somebody opened the door, you're still responsible for the crimes that you commit once the door is open. And that's the whole point she was trying to get to.
That's all it. That was it.
Somebody opened the door.
Well, if they open the door for you, was it illegal to be there?
That's not what he was charged with. I just pulled it up. He was charged with some very serious offenses that have nothing to do about whether the door is open. A lot of people were charged with offenses before the doors were open. They assaulted police officers outside. So I think that was the point she was getting to. But let's move on. I'm with.
Well, before we do anything, real quick, I want to ask a couple of questions.
Okay.
I think Phil, a couple of weeks ago, you talked about.
Well, can we do that at the end? Let's do that at the end. Let's get to the questions first, and then we can get old stuff at the end.
All right.
So just coming up in a couple of days, you've got the NFL Super Bowl. You got the Philadelphia Eagles, go Eagles, versus the Kansas City Chiefs, go Chiefs. Any Chiefs fans out there? I know in Cincinnati, that's sort of like a sore thing. I remember back in the day when people was calling Arrowhead Burrowhead, and I was telling people like, nah, we ain't earned that. I was right. We didn't earn it because the Chiefs, if they win this game, it'll be the first time in NFL history that a team has won 3 championships. To me, that is a real dynasty. Back to back to back championships. I mean, this game could be huge. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be watching it because of something that the NFL did this week. For the last 4 years in the Super Bowl games, or should I say, for the first time in 4 years, the NFL will be removing the end racism sign that you see stenciled on the end of the end zone right there. And a lot of people are speculating that it is because Donald Trump is going to be in attendance. He announced this week, and then like a day or two later, the NFL said, we're going to remove the end racism sign. In its place, they're going to have the statement, choose love. And here's a quote from someone close to the league. Choose love is appropriate to use as our country has endured in recent weeks wildfires in Southern California, and the terrorist attack here in New Orleans, the plane and helicopter crash near our nation's capital, and the plane crash in Philadelphia. So they have chosen to not use the phrase in racism and go with choose love. And I think it's all because of Donald Trump. And it's going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact on my decision to watch the game. But I want to know what you think, how you feel about that. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I don't know, man. I'm kind of a couple of different minds on this. I think you're right. I think it probably does have everything to do with Donald Trump, probably has everything to do with this assault on DEI and diversity and all of that type stuff. We know that the NFL owners have cowed to when Donald Trump has gone on the offensive against the league before. We saw it during the whole Colin Kaepernick national anthem debate, that when Donald Trump weighed in on that, and the NFL owners got concerned because some of their white fan base who support Donald Trump started to weigh in and talked about boycotting games because NFL players were kneeling like Colin Kaepernick. You saw the owners put a quick end to that. And tried to come up with all kind of ways that were going to be less offensive to the white fan base of the NFL. So the NFL is no stranger to bending the knee to kowtowing, and Donald Trump knows how to play these types of politics with the league. But I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it, mainly because of a couple of points the NFL did make. One, it seems as if teams have the option of these various end zone messages that they can have stenciled in, and throughout, I guess, the course of the year or the past few years, teams have had the option to choose what they've wanted to have on there, and they've been able to change those things. A Super Bowl is not an individual team's home field choice. It's I would say it's a league choice, and the league has obviously chosen to go down this path because obviously it's going to be less controversial. I think once Donald Trump inserts himself into these types of things, or the politics becomes a part of it, it becomes impossible to please everybody. And so just as you're talking about, you're going to boycott and not watch the game because they're taking it off. Had you left it on and Donald Trump had made a big deal out of it, there probably would have been people who wouldn't have watched it for that reason. So I think the NFL, unfortunately, because Trump, likes to interject himself into these culture war type issues, are always going to choose where they feel like their wallets are going to be impacted the least. And that's what this is.
Well, I'll just go ahead and get it out the way. I didn't know it was there in the first place. So it don't really have too much of an impact on me. And again, when it comes to some of this sports stuff, a lot of stuff be over my head because I don't be paying attention to this stuff like that until y'all bring it to my attention. But like I said, I didn't know it was there in the first place. So it's not something that I'm necessarily attached to. I can also say that I know that it's political, as most things with the NFL are. I know that not long ago, Goodell came out and said that the NFL would not be doing away with DEI. That's kind of my only kind of concern right now with the NFL. That was one of the things that I thought about, especially after the last couple of years, what we've seen in the NFL. But yeah, it doesn't really strike me. I know that it might make some people, rub some people the wrong way. And I'm interested to hear what Nate has to say because I want to know why he feels so strongly about it. But yeah, it's for me personally, I didn't know it was there in the first place, so it's not necessarily a big deal to me. But I also know that it is a very much so a clear sign that the NFL is going to do whatever it needs to do in this next 4 years to bend the knee and kind of keep the peace until the next administration.
Yeah, Phil, Kevin, you want to jump in there?
Well, I'll just flat out say, I think, Kevin, what you're saying there is that because of Donald Trump, that this slogan of end racism, that then he is in favor of the opposite, that basically Donald Trump is, I'm for racism. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is Donald Trump has traditionally made race a political issue with his assault on DEI, this notion that Black people or minorities or women in general are getting unmerited things. A lot of people will look at these end racism stencils at the end zone as a woke thing. I guarantee you, if you talk to most conservatives, they would say, hey, this is the NFL's attempt to be woke by putting these end racism messages and all of these other things in the end zone. And that's just the type of field that Donald Trump loves to play on. So of course, he's not going to come out and say that he's against ending racism, but he would come out and say, hey, this is just more woke stuff that the NFL is doing. Racism isn't a problem in this country. It's just another thing to make people angry and make them hate America. That's the field that Donald Trump plays on. And so the NFL is smart. And they know that this is absolutely where he will go to throw red meat to his base and to get out ahead of it and to take it off the table.
So his base is racist.
Take it off the table. They took that messaging off the field.
So his base is racist.
Some of it is. Kevin, hey, we can have this conversation all day. Absolutely. Look. Why did the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers? Why are the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers standing back and standing by? Because
why are the socialists? Why are the communists supporting the Democrats? We can have this issue.
Hey, we can have that conversation.
Communists.
But when you talk about the small minority of Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, the small percentage that represents of
that he just pardoned, by the way,
of Donald Trump, you're going to play those up?
He just pardoned the Proud Boy leader.
What I'm saying is that there is a lot of beneath the surface prejudice. Okay, you may not be racist, but you might have some prejudice ideas. And Donald Trump and Donald Trump,
you may not be a communist, but you have a lot of communist ideas.
The Republicans of the last 50 or 60 years have played into those racial stereotypes. Nixon's Southern strategy, all of these things, they play to these issues because they work.
A myth.
Oh, okay.
I
guess the audio tapes of people discussing these behind the scenes.
One of the things
that made public are fabricated. Kevin. Those are deep fakes, Kevin. Is that what you're telling me?
One of the things that you refuse to have a discussion on, and I brought this up before, and you refuse to have this discussion. I would love to have a situation of where we actually discuss why the Democratic Party is the party of racism. Because
Kevin,
they are.
I'm glad to sit down and have this historical debate because these are all things I've studied and I've researched, and I'll be glad to sit down. We can
I'll take your research and I'll give you my research.
Just like the presidential debate, you and me, we can get on stage and we can debate the history of politics, Republicans and Democrats. I'll be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, anytime and you'll be surprised by what you learn.
I think Kevin A is on point, and he's saying it way more diplomatic than I would. So to answer your question directly, yeah, I think that Donald Trump is a bigot and a racist because he plays in race to further his political goals and his positioning with his base. He's been doing it.
I think that's part of your Trump derangement syndrome. But
it's part of your Trump derangement syndrome, where you lose the ability to critically think when it comes to Donald Trump.
So
but when Biden's in the White House, you're an economist, you're a lawyer, you're a civil rights attorney. I mean, you know everything. When Biden's in the White House, you know everything about everything. As soon as Trump's in the White House, you plumb dumb. You can't remember anything. I don't know, maybe. So please
stop. What the hell are you talking about?
I'm talking about the way you act when we talk about Trump as opposed to Biden.
Oh, really?
When you talk about Biden, you're just a critical thinker.
Be specific.
When we talk about Trump, it's all about your emotions and your feelings.
Be specific, will you? You're going to accuse me of something.
I'm being as specific as I need to be per the conversation, but let me get back to something.
It just happened minutes ago when Phil asked you to give him a specific example of what it was you were talking about, and all you could say was, well, I don't know, I never heard that, I have no idea. That's what he's talking about.
You just said it right. But when it's Biden, you're a lawyer, you're an economist, you're an immunologist, you got all the information, you can critically think.
You're a record keeper.
You guys are so full of crap. It's
absolutely Kevin suffers from the same syndrome that I've described on this podcast many times, and I've said Phil suffers from it as well. Kevin and Phil are the types of individuals who feel like, hey, I'm not racist. I don't carry any of these ideals. I'm a fair and enlightened guy, and they may be. And what they refuse to acknowledge is, or what they refuse to accept is that the percentages of people who look like them, who don't share their ideals, are higher than they think. See, they want to limit it to a very small fringe percentage of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. But what they don't admit, and what they know, is because they've been at dinner tables, they've been in rooms and meetings where they've heard their contemporaries express racist or prejudicial things. They've seen people or their friends or even some of their family members who will clutch their purse, lock their door when they see someone of a different color come by them, but they don't want to acknowledge that that is prejudice and racism that tends to lead to a lot of these things in society that we talk about. They know this to be true. And what frustrates me is their disingenuousness of never wanting to acknowledge that and make you, me, and Raven, and anybody who look like us, make it seem like this is crazy or this is something that we're imagining, when there are people in their families and their networks and around them that do the things that we talk about, but they want to pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's the problem that I have.
I don't even know where to begin to unpack that distortion. In other words, you're telling me that you know what my friends and I talk about.
No, but you do. And I'm saying you're not going to be honest enough to admit
I do. And I will tell you that everything you just said,
there's some listeners to your trucker show that are exactly what I'm talking about. You're not going to admit that, Kevin. You're certainly not going to admit it on here. And right now, when I'm holding your feet to
so
the fire,
truckers now are racist.
There's some just
truckers are now racist.
No, I'm not saying that. I said some people who listen to your trucker show. I didn't say truckers. You do the trucker show, right? Don't you? Ain't that the name of your show?
Well, you know what I do for a living.
I didn't say truckers was racist. I said some people who listen to your show. Yes, they are. I'm gonna say that. You got some listeners. And I would guarantee you the format. I guarantee you, Kevin. I guarantee you, Kevin, that there are certain things you can't say on that show because if you said it on that show, you wouldn't be on that show.
Wow.
Because of the listener base.
Wow.
So you telling me that's not true, Kevin?
I am telling you that's not true.
Go in there and start talking some woke stuff and see how long you go in there and start talking some of this woke stuff, Kevin, and see how long you on air.
Well, first of all, I would have to agree with this woke stuff that you want me to talk about. So first of all, that conversation won't come up because I think the woke crap that we've been experiencing over the last several years is a load of crap and people have had enough of it. Because what you talk about in terms of DEI and the way that it has been co-opted by the fringe elements of your party to the point where they have taken control of the party has distorted the whole concept of DEI.
That is a gross distortion right there.
What?
You talk about gross distortions where you talk about, and this is a gross distortion and the derangement syndrome.
Does DEI have anything to do
on the
with
right who want to say that fringe elements on the left end progressive part of the Democratic Party control it? That is absolutely not true. And that is a gross
the fringe elements are the people that are running the Democratic Party right now.
Absolutely not.
How can you say that in one breath, but then when we point out what you identified to be the fringe elements of the conservatives and the GOP party, when we point out what you consider to be the fringe of that party over there, they not touching nothing. They don't have no influence. They not running nothing. But you can very clearly and easily say that, oh, it's the fringe influence of whoever is over there on that Democratic side. They're the people who run everything. But you don't see how that could be applicable to Republicans.
So what you want me to believe is the fact that with Donald Trump in this last election that increased the amount of African Americans that voted for him, increased the number of people as far as the Hispanic community that voted for him, that somehow that all of these blacks that supported him are white supremacists?
No, what I'm saying is that what I do know about a lot of the black people who did vote for him is that there's a difference between voting for a candidate because you believe in white supremacy and voting for a candidate because you are the result of white supremacy. There's a difference there. And I think that
of white supremacy.
Yes, there's a difference between supporting white supremacy and being a result of it. What we have found that the minority voters and who you would consider to be part of marginalized groups who did vote that way, they are the result of white supremacy. They have adapted to a system that was not meant or built to benefit them, and in order to survive, some of them feel that they have to align themselves with white supremacy to do so. That is very different than somebody wholeheartedly believing in white supremacy, and that's the way that things should be.
Wow. That is somebody.
That's life in America as a marginalized group.
Somebody coming from a perspective of just so far out of the realm of reality that I just can't. I don't even know.
What do you mean? It's out of the realm of your reality, Kevin, because you don't have to make those kind of decisions. You benefit from white supremacy. You'll never have the experience of having to align yourself with it to survive. You experience it whether you want to or not.
Okay, so we're back to the whole thing of white privilege and white supremacy, which is a load of crap, and you know it.
It's not a load of crap. It's what the station was founded on.
As long as you can fan the flames of victimhood, I guess that makes you feel good.
My people were victims. What are you talking about? My people were victims.
Your people were victims.
You're saying that the formerly enslaved people in this country were never victims. That's what you're saying.
Well, if you look at the number of people that I mean, when you go back to, well, first of all, let's start off with who created the victimhood in the first place.
The answer is
the Democratic Party was the party of slavery. The Democratic Party was the party of Jim Crow.
That's not not what I asked you, Kevin. You're not answering the question.
It was the Republicans, people like me, that said that that's ridiculous. That should end. And that's
not what I asked you, question. That's not what I asked you, Kevin. You're not answering the question, Kevin. Stay on topic, Kevin. That's not what I asked you.
So because of that, because I am the type of person, because I am one of the people that would have been there on the front lines during the Civil War, because now I'm a white supremacist, because I believe that
this is why I would eat you alive if we would go into a historical. This is why I would eat you alive if we would go into a historical debate.
The hell you would.
If you're going to talk about the history, if you're going to talk about the history of the Republican Party and why they decided to end slavery, we can pull historical quotes from Lincoln, who talked about not necessarily any moral ground behind it. Lincoln was interested in preserving the Union. Lincoln was interested, he was least interested in the plight of Black folks and more interested in trying to hold things together and keep the South from seceding from the Union. It had little to do with a moral obligation to Black people. He was more concerned about his white brethren and holding the Union together. And again, these are all historical documented facts that you can pull from Lincoln's own words and his own quotes about his motivation for going into the Civil War. But like with most other things, we try to romanticize post haste the reality and rewrite history, which is kind of what Donald Trump is trying to do now with January 6th and a whole lot of other things. But history gets rewritten and romanticized. But fortunately, we have a little thing like historical documents, like tapes, like stuff that people actually wrote down and put on paper that you can verify and you can go back and look back to and say, oh, this is what they really said and this is what they really thought, versus, oh, what I kind of want to believe. It's sort of just like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who so many white folks revere now, who hated him and called him a troublemaker and all of these different things, that he was stirring up the pot back in the 60s, but we revere him now when he wasn't revered then. So I'm all for, let's talk about history, but if we're going to talk about history, we're going to tell the truth.
Please be accurate. Please be accurate. This we all like we're all I distinctly remember in high school being taught American government. And my American government, shout out to Mr. Hess. He gave us an assignment where he had us go through all of the original Democratic and Republican Party. He had us go through all of their values and assign ourselves to a party based on the values that we agreed with. Imagine my shock when I realized that I was Republican.
There you go.
And then I had him explain to me why the values that were in the Republican Party at that time do not mirror the current one. This was taught to me by my American government teacher. He allowed me an opportunity to learn that over time, the parties basically switched places because certain things were done in certain administrations that caused that to happen. So just to be sitting up here pretending like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have never, ever gone through shifts or changes with different administrations, it is intellectually dishonest. Well, it is why I find it hard to have these conversations with you, Kevin, because you like to be intellectually dishonest about what we're talking about.
Look at your own party, even examples today that exist.
Sorry, that's not true. I do not find myself and my beliefs anywhere within the Republican Party as it stands.
Well, I will tell you this, that two of the biggest racists that are in, well, three, I can name you three racists that are very high up in the Democratic Party right now.
For your three, I can name you times three.
Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. Three of the biggest racists in this country.
But you know what, Kevin? You know what's so interesting?
Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan, Nixon. I can get for your three. I can give you three. Absolutely.
Oh dear God.
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson wasn't a racist.
He was. I mean, look,
he probably was.
Hey, Kevin, you're not.
Lyndon Johnson was a racist.
Kevin, you're not going to win this.
I'm not going to win this argument with anyone that refuse to look at the truth. That's the problem.
We refuse to look at the truth.
Hey, Kevin, anyone that you would name, I would almost be willing to concede, because it only furthers my point that I'm trying to make to you and Phil about the percentage of white folks who have racist, prejudiced tendencies. I'm not going to give the Clintons a pass because I remember some of the things that they have said and done, that they did when Barack Obama was running, that they did when they passed the crime bill, which Joe Biden was a part of it, that Joe Biden liked the lunch and confab with segregationists and all. I'm not going to argue with you on a lot of black people will argue that. And I would agree with you in trying to defend the Democrats, but I'm not one of them dudes. I'm not going to sit here and say that you don't have racists in the Democrats and the Republican Party as well. I'm going to concede that point to you, right? But the difference is what I see from a policy perspective of late. Again, I use this context over the last 50 or so years. It's undeniable that the Democratic Party has done more to further the interests of black people than the Republican Party has. And there are examples in policy that you can show. Now, have they also passed some policies that have set back some of those gains? Absolutely, Kevin. Absolutely. See, that's the difference between me and you. I will recognize the imperfections in the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. But for you, the Republican Party has never done anything wrong. They're the flawless people who always make every policy decision in the best interest of people. And that is the problem that we have collectively as a country, is that too many of us are too busy stumping for our party instead of stumping for what's right.
And let me give you a modern day example here, right? To bring it all the way home and bring it back to the conversation. I'm not watching the Super Bowl because the NFL has let me down. Here we are talking about, this is sad commentary as to our leadership, where the NFL has to remove the phrase "in racism" to placate a president. I mean, think about that. They're removing this from the field because of Donald Trump, because he might politicize it. He might turn into some crusade for MAGA. And that is sad commentary about where we are as a country.
What is a sad
and about his leadership. That says incredibly bad things, Kevin, about Donald Trump's leadership.
And Nathan,
I know it's hard to hear, Kevin, but it says incredibly bad things about Donald Trump's leadership.
We will never get to the point where there's no racism
feels like they have to remove
every little
in racism.
Kevin, racism is not going to end with me having an attitude adjustment.
They have to remove the phrase "in racism" just to placate the president. That is sad.
Where is your evidence of that? Where is your evidence of that?
They're doing it right now. What do you mean, where's my evidence? My evidence is the articles in which they've been reporting about the decision made by the NFL.
Okay, so Donald Trump wants racism. Dear God.
Here's what we have to concede, Nathan.
Plays the culture wars. We've been talking about this. It's the same Southern strategy. The same thing he did with birtherism. We're going to talk about Hillary, right?
Here's what we Donald Trump
rode that horse for the last
few years. Southern strategy. How did Bill Clinton carry the South? How did Jimmy Carter carry the South?
It's the same thing about Donald Trump talking about black and brown immigrants. Have you noticed on Fox News? I know you've seen this, Kevin, where they see the video of the migrants who being sent to Guantanamo Bay. Have you seen those images?
Yes.
You ain't seen no white migrants, have you? You ain't seen no white migrants with the hands behind their back led out the country because it was a black and brown thing. So it is sad commentary that Donald Trump,
because somebody is a gangbanger and is in this country, racism, who has been convicted,
he traffics in Southern strategy. He traffics in trying to scare white people. Then black and brown people are trying to take something from you.
Hey Nathan, here's where Kevin lives. Here's where Kevin lives, and here's what makes it so difficult for you, me, Raven, or anybody who looks like us to make the case. Because here's what Kevin said.
Okay.
It's absolutely. Wait. Let me say. I'm about to give you some credit. Dog. Let me get it out. Let me give you some credit.
You can come into my head and know exactly what I'm thinking.
I'm about to give you some credit based on what you just said. Kevin said this. He said there's no evidence, and you know what, Nathan? He's 100% right. There is no evidence. The NFL hasn't said, hey, we're removing this stencil in racism thing because of Donald Trump, or that because we're scared of the culture war, or simply because the president is showing up. He's absolutely right. As far as video, written documentation, unless we find some emails behind the scene, Kevin is absolutely right. There's no evidence to substantiate that is why the NFL is moving it. But I'm here to tell you this, that there are a whole lot of things that people on the right believe that support evidence, like your contention that the 2020 election was stolen. But in your gut, you feel like, even though there's no evidence, you know this is what happened, or you feel like this is why this happened. I'm not saying I believe the 2020 election was stolen, but the point that I'm trying to make to get Kevin to at least kind of see it is, you have no evidence that the 2020 election was stolen, but you feel like, because of what you feel like you've seen, that you believe it was stolen. So just like Nathan is sitting here saying, look, I don't have any direct evidence that this is the reason why the NFL is doing this, but it sure looks a lot like that to me because of the circumstances that are around. So if you want people to respect your belief based on what you see and feel about the 2020 election, then give that space to Nathan and those of us who are saying that this is the reason why the NFL is doing it. May not look like that to you. You're saying that's ridiculous. We're saying
I'll tell you exactly where it's
stolen was ridiculous.
You want me to answer the question? I'll tell you where it's ridiculous. All right. You look at the total number of people that voted in the 2020 election versus 2024. What happened to the 11 million people more that voted in the 2020 election? Did they suddenly?
Same thing that happened to all the people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016.
So suddenly they didn't care about the election. Okay, I see.
No, I'm saying people all the time.
The percentage of the
people all the time.
Let me finish, please.
Stay home
let me
about elections for a whole lot of different reasons.
Will you let me finish? If you look at the percentage of the people, all you got to do is look at the total amount of the population and the percentage of the people that voted in every election from 1960 up until the present time. And you look at the percentage of people of people that voted. That was always around 37, 38%. The highest it ever got was around 40%. And you're going to tell me that in one election in 2020, suddenly 47% of the population came out and voted. I'm
telling you, during a global pandemic, absolutely.
Why I don't believe that? Hey, Kevin, you want to know why I believe that was possible? Because if you look at voting and what typically happens for when people don't vote, okay, you had a system last year where a lot of people were allowed to, or during that year where a lot of people were allowed to do mail-in voting. And you saw that the mail-in voting was particularly high in that particular year because we were in COVID and there were a whole lot of accommodations that were being made to allow people to vote. One of the biggest impediments of people actually getting out to vote is actually getting to the polls to vote on election day. Okay, a lot of people
can't get off your butt and go to the election, and you can't vote
because they have to work, because they might have disabilities or handicaps. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to eliminate.
So there's 11 million
you're trying to eliminate the context of that election. You're trying to eliminate the context.
Why is that so impossible for you to believe that there are disabled people who miss out on their chance and their access to vote?
11 million.
How many disabled people do you think is the correct number, Kevin?
Well, I'll tell you what I would love to know is how many of those votes that were mailed in by the people that actually were assigned to that ballot. I know I got 3 here.
Theories now.
Yeah, Kevin, but you know what? I actually wrote about this. You know what's interesting? You know what's interesting, Kevin? After the 2020 election, I interviewed Secretary of State Frank LaRose. And he said, this is what he said. I don't care what he says now, but I have audio recordings. I have my notes. I have the story that I published that he has never asked me to take down or retract one single thing. You know what Frank LaRose told me? He said that all of this talk about conspiracy theories about the election being stolen is a bunch of bunk. He said that politicians on both sides, voter suppression is overstated and voter fraud is overstated. And he wasn't just talking about Ohio. He was talking about nationally. It's a ruse that politicians use when they lose. And basically he said that I asked him that question because I said the same thing. I said, hey, Frank, I said, I got like voter absentee ballots for the people who used to live at my house versus I was here. I was like, I did that. I imagine a whole lot of other people did it. He was like, do you know the extent to which somebody would have to be able to go to get that off? You would have to know the social security number of the individual who it was sent to. You would have to duplicate their signature in order to send it in. All of these, which are felony crimes, by the way. And then you would have to hope that all of that got through all of the checks and verification systems that they have at the Board of Elections, that both Republicans and Democrats have to look at. So this notion that you can fabricate millions of absentee ballots and get that off is ridiculous. It's impossible. And then for people to keep quiet about it, this is the type of ridiculousness that defies facts that Donald Trump has gotten you to swallow. And it's ridiculous. And before Frank LaRose got swallowed up by the MAGA movement, he had the guts to say that on the record after the 2020 election. Now, if you talk to MAGA-fied Frank LaRose now, he'd probably tell you some different stuff. It's just like him and Rob Portman and all of these other cats that I thought had integrity. And that's why I give Phil Heimlich credit, because he ain't drank the Kool-Aid. You can hate on him all you want, but he has not drunk the Kool-Aid. He's still a conservative.
That's a great intro to Phil.
There's a lot I don't agree with Phil Heimlich on, but at least he's had the integrity to continue to live on Earth One, unlike the rest of these MAGA rats that have basically gone down rats.
So we're MAGA rats, we're deplorables, we're racist, and whatever.
Yeah, Kevin. If you're gonna stand on lies and fiction, I'm gonna stand on that.
Okay.
I've been
live in your delusional world, Kevin.
Because what I'm tired of is people who want to stand on lies and myth truth and who don't want to educate themselves and continue to live in a false reality because of this con man. Then you are what you are. I'm not saying it about you. You're saying it about yourself by what you're choosing.
After what we experienced over the previous 4 years, and you will sit there and say, I have no evidence that Joe Biden was declining mentally. And then with the evidence that presented, that you said,
I'm not saying that. You never heard me say that.
You said that on this
Kevin,
program.
I would take a declining Joe Biden over what we have with Trump right now and any day, every day.
In the history of this country over the last 4 years of
I wish Joe Biden was still the president.
So what I want to know is who, and you as a journalist, you have never asked the question, who's been running the thing? Who's been running the show for the last 4 years?
Joe and Kamala. And I wish they were still running.
So here's what I've said, Kevin. If you want to know, if you want to go back and you want to know what I've said is that I'm not a doctor and neither are you. And there's no evidence to support that Joe Biden had any kind of medically diagnosed cognitive decline. Now, there's a difference between me saying, hey, look, I can clearly see with my eyes that this dude is getting old, that he's a little bit slow, that he's got a stuttering problem that probably exacerbates the fact that when you get old and you slow down, and it does take you a little bit longer. It takes me. I'm not even as old as Joe Biden, and I'm not as quick as I used to be.
He is.
Joe has always struggled with his stuff, so that
he's been in public life.
That's different than saying somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's. That is a medical diagnosis. So until you show me proof, medical diagnosis, you can't say Joe Biden has that. That is what I've said.
Even if he had it, I would take him over Trump.
So 50 years of public life, all of a sudden he's got a stuttering problem.
Joe has always had a stuttering problem. Don't even start that. He has always had a stuttering problem.
This is ridiculous.
Hey, Phil, we want to hear
if you know anything about somebody who actually has a speech impediment or a stuttering problem, you also know that it comes and goes.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Phil, what's on your mind?
Well, I am also boycotting the Super Bowl, but it's because I love college football and I don't like pro football. So that's the basis. But there's not much doubt in my mind that the reason they changed that message was they were just bending the knee, and corporate America, the rest is bending the knee. My only concern about focusing too much on that is I think it can become like a shiny object that takes our attention away from the fact that this country is in the process of becoming an oligarchy, where a bunch of very, very wealthy people are basically ending up running the country. And when I talk about severe consequences, right now, because of one oligarch, there are 20 million people or more around the world who depend on the USA Group for vaccines and desperately needed food. And they're being cut off just like that, because of one oligarch. And what I was reading the other day about that oligarch is he's now apparently interested in buying CBS. Well, what do you think is going to happen to CBS News if and when Musk or one of the other billionaires buys that? Guess what? CBS News has actually a pretty proud history going back to Edward R. Murrow of independent journalism. I'll guarantee you, if he gets hold of that, that's gone. It's gone. It's just going to become another kind of media source that probably will have a hands-off approach to Trump. So I'm not disagreeing with anything, but I think we need to keep our eyes on the ball, and the real danger is this corporate kind of control of our country.
And let me make one point of clarity, since Kevin brought this up. I don't believe in necessarily trying to lump all people into one group. So when I said MAGA, so I'm just trying to understand, Kevin, do you consider yourself MAGA? Because I think MAGA is very different from Republicans. Not every Republican is a MAGA. Okay. So there are MAGA and then there's a Republican. So I'm asking you, do you consider yourself MAGA or do you consider yourself a Republican?
Well, what does MAGA stand for?
So MAGA, I consider the blind sycophants who follow Donald Trump no matter what he says, no matter what he does.
What does MAGA stand for?
You don't question it. You go along with it. You take the cultural red meat. You take the cultural red meat that he toss out. That's MAGA. So if you count yourself among somebody who drinks everything that he says unquestioned, you love the red meat that he tosses out, you defend him on everything that he does regardless, then you MAGA.
The answer is yes. I can see it.
So it's your definition of what MAGA means, right?
Well, that's the standard definition. Kind of like DEI, Kevin. Kind of like DEI.
First of all, if you're asking me if I'm in favor of Make America Great Again, yes, I am.
When was it ever great?
I gave you the definition.
All right. I don't accept your definition of MAGA.
I want America to be great. I don't
accept your definition of MAGA.
But it doesn't really matter.
You can call it something else and then ask me that
self-identification type thing, Kevin.
No, I'm not. But if you're going
to Kevin, I'm telling you.
You would self-identify as MAGA, Kevin?
Hey, Kevin, I want America to be great again? Yes, I do.
I'm just asking you straight up. Do you self-identify as MAGA?
When people reference MAGA, do you hear yourself in that?
You guys are assigning MAGA.
I'm not assigning
anything. Has nothing to do with MAGA.
Hey, Nathan, I just want to be clear from where I was coming from, because Kevin took offense when I said MAGA, and he said, "Oh, we're rats, we're deplorables, all this stuff."
If that's your definition,
he said we when I said that. Okay, so he assumed I was talking to him when I made that statement. So he asked. So
I reject your definition of MAGA.
Let me finish, Kevin. So the people I was referring to in my comment are the people that ascribe to the definition that I just gave you about what MAGA. That's who I'm talking to. So if you were offended by what I said, if you're saying that definition that I just gave to you don't apply to you, then you don't need to be offended by what I said. But if that definition that I gave for MAGA does apply to you, then I was talking to you.
I reject your definition of MAGA.
I'm not saying that is the definition of MAGA. I'm saying
that's
who I was talking to.
Hey, Kevin, if you meet Donald Trump and he asks me the question, what are you going to say?
Do I support all the crap that you just said?
He's going to say no.
Mm-hmm. I would say, no, I don't support the red meat and all that crap that you try to assign. If you're going to call that MAGA, then I'm going to tell you you're full of crap.
Kevin, if you meet Donald Trump,
Kevin, if your answer to that was no,
are you MAGA? What are you going to say?
If you're going to ask me if I'm MAGA, am I in favor of Make America Great Again? Yes, I am.
If you meet Donald Trump and he asks you, hey, Kevin, are you MAGA? What is your response?
I don't know how you can answer.
It's a very straightforward question,
other than saying yes. But
Okay,
now, if
so
you're
you're
going to
MAGA then.
ascribe
That's
MAGA
it.
to the crap that Kevin just came out of his mouth,
That's
then
Kevin's
no.
definition. I get it. I knew he's not going to agree to your definition, but he's MAGA for all intents and purposes. When they say MAGA in the crowd, Kevin is like, "Yeah, we MAGA. Are you dark MAGA, black MAGA, all that kind of stuff?"
You know,
Since we asking,
well then,
I mean, I understand what that kind of means. Like dark MAGA means like you're really, really like hugging on to, Trump's, you know what.
Nathan, there isn't a person out there. I don't even think you could actually say that I would agree 100% with Jesus Christ, for crying out loud. But am I a Christian? Yes. But now, if you're going to say a Christian is this, that, the other thing, which has nothing to do with Christianity,
disagree with?
I'm going to deny that.
I got to know. What do you
You're a Christian, but you don't agree with Jesus Christ. That is the most insane thing I have ever heard.
Actually, it's not Raven, because if Jesus had 100% approval rating, he wouldn't have wound up on the cross. So
exactly.
This is true.
So I don't think it may sound crazy, but the fact of the matter is, ain't nobody, including Jesus, got 100%.
You are walking around repping his name, talking about you don't agree. Okay.
Okay. Hey, here's what I'm willing to say, Raven. No, here's what I will say, and now y'all making me put my theological hat on. But there are a lot of people in church on Sunday, every Sunday, that claim to repping Jesus that don't agree with.
You're not wrong, but to say that there are things that Jesus has said that I don't agree with. I can see if he said there are things that I can see, Kevin. I can see if he said there are things that Jesus has said that I think I might have a different interpretation of, but that's not what he said. He said there are things that Jesus says or has said that I don't agree with. Full stop. That is not a Christian.
I'll tell you one thing.
No, I said that if I were around during the time of Jesus and listen to everything he said, because you have to separate. Now, I'll put on my theology hat here, if you don't mind, because I've got 2 years of seminary experience, which
I didn't know that, Kevin.
Yes,
that's
you do.
impressive.
Well,
I did not know that.
Now, if you look at everything, you have to separate.
Can we call you Reverend from now on? Sorry, go ahead.
You can call me everything else in the book, so you might as well call me that too. But if you separate the human side of Jesus versus the divine side of Jesus, then yes, there are certain things from the humanity side that yes, you can disagree with. Now, from the divinity side, not. What?
Like what?
Especially, let me see. Let me think of an example here
he hung out with drunkards. How about that?
What?
Yeah, he was criticized for that.
I know. I'm just teasing.
Tax collectors and all sorts of
murderers, gangsters, thugs, all type of different people. That's the entire point of Christianity, is to bridge the gap between you and my father. That's the entire point.
Okay. Again, separate the divinity side from the human side.
There is no separation. There is no separating Christ from divinity. There's no such thing, Kevin. He is the Word made flesh. There's no such thing.
Okay. All right. So again, once
fully God, fully human, can't separate that.
What's that?
I said Jesus was fully God, fully human. Can't separate the two.
There were parts of his humanity side and part of his divine side. So, period. I mean, again, you have to you separate the two. Not everything that Jesus Christ was ever said. Number one, we don't know that everything that he said was actually written down in form, because a lot of the gospels and the stuff written about him were written 30, 40, 50 years after he was gone. And so do we know everything that was done as far as Christ was concerned? No. But do I agree with the overall concept of Christianity and so on? Yes, I do. But I don't know that you can actually say that some of the discussions that he had as far as a human being, I mean, I don't agree with him actually supposedly in the Garden of Gethsemane, if he knew he was divine, actually questioning whether or not he should go through with this.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take Sister V's exit ramp and not to get too bogged down in the religion piece. Like I want to bring it back to the NFL, then move
All right,
on.
so let's
I
bring it
think
back to the
I think the
NFL here for a
NFL.
moment.
I think
So
I
you're
think the
telling
NFL.
me,
Well, can I finish it, man? I didn't get it out yet.
because I
Right.
never weighed in on this.
Oh, I thought you did already. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. First of all, I don't think Donald Trump had a damn thing to do with this, because on the one hand, you're saying that Donald Trump somehow, because of the NFL sucking up to him or bending the knee to him,
Yeah.
that suddenly is taking this out. But on the other hand, they're being very bold and not bending the knee and saying, we're not ending DEI. Which is bigger?
Yeah.
I think they're both important. I mean,
Well,
like
if they're
the
not on
Super
the
Bowl
one
is
hand
the
bending
biggest
the knee,
television
why
event,
would they
right?
bend the knee
Hundreds of
here?
millions of people, right?
What?
The Super
Sorry?
Bowl is the biggest single televised event of the year, right? Hundreds of millions of people are going to watch this. So that kind of visibility is priceless. So I think they're both important. And
Yeah,
I
and I
think
would say
they're clearly playing the game. So for instance, if Kamala Harris were president, they probably wouldn't have to do this. If Joe Biden, well, we know that because Joe Biden's been a president, and they didn't
yeah,
feel the need to do this.
they absolutely wouldn't do
Well,
it.
the difference is that Joe Biden wouldn't have known that they didn't do it. So
Listen, I will take a slow Joe over what we see
let
with
me
Donald
address
Trump
Kevin's
any day of the year, Kevin.
let me
Any day of
address
the year, I'll take
Kevin's
that.
point about let me address Kevin's point real quickly about because I don't ever like Kevin to get anything off unchallenged that he tries to slip in. So it's like why would they not do DEI but remove the racism thing? Because the racism thing is low-hanging fruit. It's a simple thing. It's something that's going to go beneath the notice of most people. As Raven said, she didn't even know it was there. I think a lot of people probably feel that way, that they didn't even know it's there. A lot of people aren't plugged in like Nathan. A lot of people aren't going to be like Nathan and say that they're not going to watch it simply because the NFL did that. I know they're getting rid of it. I'm still going to watch the Super Bowl. Okay. There are different people that feel different ways about it. To me, it's a small thing in the grand scheme. And I think the NFL feels that way as well. It's a small thing. Ain't going to get much blowback. Probably would have flown beneath the radar. Most people, it's going to get swallowed up most likely in all of the hype leading up to Sunday's game. Probably not going to register a whole lot. Get rid of DEI. You got to remember the majority of your employee workforce is minorities, right? You got vast majority of the NFL players are black, right? Or of some type of minority descent that play in that league. It's a much bigger issue. If you say we're getting rid of DEI when your workforce is predominantly minority, that is a fight the NFL don't want to take on, even with the president, because now you've alienated and you've pissed off on a high level a lot of your employees who got to play the game for you. Let's not forget that if not for the talent on the field, the NFL owners have no product in which to make the billions that they make off of it. So they only going to go so far with that.
And DEI also encompasses a large number of marginalized groups.
So because there's a disproportionate amount of African Americans that are better at sports than the white population, that is an example of DEI. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying that black people care about DEI programs. And so you're not going to do something that's going to piss off your product base, your employee base. So if the NFL gets rid of DEI, I guarantee you
NFL is a meritocracy. So having DEI, I don't understand.
If you want to say that is by and large true, but not 100% true.
You know, Kevin, we had a discussion a few weeks ago about affirmative action, and when you came up through the ranks and some of the stuff that you experienced, and from my experience, from what I observed during that period of time of my coming up through the ranks at that, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but as far as seeing what transpired during that period of time, there were a lot of people that were saying, yes, of course, you got to level the playing field. But the problem with that is, and when you start now, instead of affirmative action, you go the DEI route, you throw people into a position that in effect, a lot of times they have no business being in that position.
That's not accurate.
And then if they fail, then it gives the side that you ascribe to me to say, see, that doesn't work. No, the problem is it puts a disservice to the people that are in there.
So Kevin, Kevin, you haven't been on in a few podcasts, and this has been the subject of probably our last 2 or 3 where we've talked about this. And so that is a false narrative that people who don't like DEI try to assign to it, that unqualified people are getting jobs. I'll just simply say this. You probably don't have a problem with Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and all of the myriad of other unqualified people that Donald Trump is appointing to cabinet positions. And look, there's no question. These folks are not the best people for those jobs. Even you can't sit there and say that in good conscience, Kevin, that they are. So where is the meritocracy in that? There is none. Donald Trump picked who he wanted to pick, mostly his loyalists, people who were going to do what he said do. And nobody sees a problem with that. And that happens way more often than people think in corporate America. Companies, CEOs, they hire who they want to hire. Now, granted, they want to get people who are at the top of the game. But I've said this all the time. This best person for the job thing is subjective. It's a very subjective thing. And a lot of times we don't find out until we see the results that are being produced. And I think on many levels, on many levels, when you see the results of people who have found themselves in these positions, they have not proven themselves to be any more unqualified than anybody who had the position prior to them or after them after they've moved up. This is a false boogeyman that I think some very racist and prejudiced people try to use to make it seem like white folks are losing out on something. They're not. Trust me, they're not. White women have benefited more from DEI than anybody else. So let's just end this charade that somehow or another white folks are losing out because of DEI. It's a lie. It's like everything else that Donald Trump peddles in. It's misinformation and disinformation. Okay.
As a matter of fact, I would argue that white people have the most to lose from removing DEI. Absolutely. Because you are the greatest benefiters of it. Well, they don't have. We also have to mention as well that because I don't want us to get pigeonholed into what we think DEI is. They do that. The people who are against DEI do it because it's where their mind goes. They assign DEI to be something that is only racial, but it is not. DEI is for not only minorities, but it is also for the disabled. It is for women. It is for people who are economically disadvantaged. It's not just about Black people and brown people who have access to certain things. The reason why the NFL came out and said that we're not doing away with DEI, it probably has a great deal to do with the fact that most of the players on the field are minorities, but they also have employees who are women. They also have employees who are disabled. They also have employees who probably live under the poverty line. You don't alienate all those different graphics of people at the same time on Super Bowl Sunday. You just don't do that. So it's bigger than just, we don't want to upset Black people. We don't want to upset the many people who stand to lose something if we say something like, well, we no longer support DEI initiatives. You have now alienated millions of viewers. You're not going to do that if you want people to watch the Super Bowl.
The NFL is not going to get rid of DEI. They're not going to get rid of DEI because they're smart. Because anybody who is smart in business understands that diversity and inclusion is good for business. Only complete idiots who don't understand how the world works don't understand that having a diverse workforce, having diverse people in your product designs and at all levels of your company don't realize that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a winning formula, okay? And these companies that are claiming that they're going to get rid of it, and I've said this, I don't believe they're really going to get rid of it. I think they're saying what they need to say to get Donald Trump off of their back. But they are not going to discontinue doing what brings them more money and more business, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. They just won't call it that, or they won't call it anything at all. But they will continue to do it. But they will get rid of the label to keep it from being a red meat thing that Donald Trump does. So I recognize right now that we're mad at Walmart and McDonald's and all of these companies that are saying they're doing away with DEI. And they're doing away probably with that language and labels because some of them may have grants or federal funding or things that they're relying on to come into them to help their bottom line. but they're smart in business and they understand that diversity and inclusion is
and they're a bunch of racists.
And they'll continue to do it. They'll continue to do it. They just won't call it DEI.
Well, and the thing is in the NFL, I don't think you can look at another organization.
Your assessment of the importance of this, like, I think you're underplaying that. And I get it.
I'm not underplaying it. I'm just saying the reality of what they're going to do.
You are underplaying it, and I understand it because we make excuses for the things that we want to do, right? And everybody wants to watch the Super Bowl. So we're going to make excuses.
I don't have to make an excuse for watching the Super Bowl. Watching the Super Bowl is what I'm going to do, and it has very little to do.
Small as possible.
It has very little to do with that.
Let me finish. This is a missed opportunity by the NFL to stand up to Donald Trump and stand on business, right? Like, if the NFL can't stand up to Donald Trump, who can? And you know what? I think you're right. They're doing this because it's an easy thing to do. You just change the stenciling. That's it. That's real easy. It's low hanging fruit.
It doesn't require any actual effort.
I also believe that if Donald Trump put enough pressure on them, they would announce that they're going to end their DEI programs as well. And I think there's an overall cost.
Well, I think if you're looking at the NFL,
let me finish. I think there's an overall cost to our culture when you see these corporate giants, these business entities who are bending the knee and not standing on what is right. If you believe that in racism, and is there a better time for that to be out there? You got all these attacks on some levels, black and brown people, right? All these initiatives, right? You got a Trump White House where they have very little to no black people whatsoever. Now is the time for the NFL to stand up and stand on business. In a lot of these cities, these stadiums are being dual financed, private and also public dollars. A lot of black people are paying their money, or in some way the tax code is being benefited in their locale to benefit the renovation and the building of these stadiums. You got the NFL is what, 60, 70% black. Stand on business. And if they can't do it,
I think that's easy. I think that's easy to say when your business don't depend on standing on business. And here's my point on this is, again, you live in a world of idealism. I live in the world of how it is. We've had this conversation before. You argue about what you
I'm not giving you that. You can continue, but I don't think that's the way you see it.
Because you're not living in the reality that most businesses they're not going out looking to pick fights. They're not going out looking to pick fights. I get it.
Capitalism is a coward. I get that. I get it.
And they're always going to side. They're always going to side on the side of the bottom line. Always is an absolute. 98, 99% of the time, they're going to decide on the bottom line. So here's what I'm going to ask you. So are you prepared to say that as a result of standing on business, that you're going to lose 50% of your business, and therefore maybe you employ 1,000 black people who feed their families, who are now going to lose those jobs because you've lost 50% of your business trying to stand on business on a small principle like stenciling at the end of the end zone. I'm not saying this is the case at the end zone. I'm just using a hypothetical. That standing on business is going to cost you half your business, which is going to cause you to lay off half your workforce, which is going to impact thousands of black people who might work for you. So are you going to sit there and say, on this small thing, I'm going to stand on business, but as a result of that, thousands of people are going to experience pain because I need to stand on this principle that may or may not make a difference for me standing on it?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, I would say that this is not a small thing. You keep making it a small thing.
It is a small thing.
You want it to be a small thing because you want to watch the Super Bowl.
No, you don't want to think about it. You want to watch the Super Bowl, and you don't want to be. Nathan, let me explain this. You don't want to be burdened. The stenciling has zero to do with my decision.
Can I answer the question? But to answer, so number one, I just reject that off the top. But then number two, what I would say is that's not what's going to happen. Nobody's going to turn off the Super Bowl. That's not what's going to happen. Nobody's going to turn off the NFL. The NFL is not going to lose 50% of their revenue. They're too ingrained into our society.
I'm saying,
but that's the point, though. But that's my point. The NFL is big enough, one of the few entities to stand up to Trump. They are the people that should be doing it.
They haven't stood up to Trump on stuff like this. Again, taking you back to the Colin Kaepernick situation, which in my opinion was way bigger than what you're talking about right here. The NFL,
to me, they're the same.
The NFL bent the knee. No, I'm saying they're not the same because Colin Kaepernick was a national discussion. Ain't nobody talking about this, bruh. Ain't nobody talking about the end racism end zone stencil, but probably
You
us.
are right about that.
You know, and maybe that story out there, but
what
if
was
you want to talk, if you want to talk about, if you want to talk about,
something is only a big deal if everybody's talking about it.
Standing on something that would have, if you want to talk, wait, let me finish. Let me finish my thought, Nathan.
What was
if you want to, let me finish my thought, bruh. If you want to stand on, if you're talking about standing on something that would have made a real big difference, let's remember everything that was going on around the time of the Colin Kaepernick situation, the national anthem protest, the police brutality situation that was going on. There was way more at stake at that time than what you're talking about right here.
But you're making my point. This would not have affected the NFL. You're making my point. My point is that the NFL could withstand whatever Donald Trump might have done if he got upset and dangled red meat. Okay, so what? It would not have affected their bottom line.
Evidently not, because the owners drew a line in the sand there, and they very much talked about how that was impacting their bottom lines. And if there's anything we know, especially from the representation that we have here in Cincinnati with the Brown family, the owners are going to side with their wallet every single time. And so that's what happened with Colin Kaepernick.
Because the owners side with their wallets,
because the boycotts and the protests that was coming along with that.
So because it's all about money all the time then. So
that's what I said.
Your logic then, what you were against what Colin Kaepernick did then.
No, I was not against what Colin Kaepernick did.
Okay, then you're not consistent then. How could you be in favor of what Colin Kaepernick did then, but now you're saying the NFL did the right thing but not standing with that sign on ending racism? It's the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
Colin Kaepernick stood on business fighting against racism in terms of police brutality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're talking about the NFL removing a sign that says "in racism."
Let me ask you this, Nathan. So Nathan, what happened to Colin Kaepernick?
He was blackballed and ostracized.
No longer in the league.
And I stopped watching the game.
Let me ask you this.
Wait. And that's the reason why I stopped watching the NFL for years.
We were just talking about the percentage.
Within the last 2 years because of what they did to Colin Kaepernick.
We were just talking about the percentages of players that were in the NFL, right? How many of Colin Kaepernick's counterparts in the NFL are also no longer in the league because they stood with Colin Kaepernick?
Too many. But what is your point?
My point is when it come down to the bottom line, people gonna choose their bag. The players chose their bag. And they didn't stand with Colin Kaepernick and get put out of the league and not be back. They stood on their bag. The owners stood on their bag.
Colin Kaepernick is the man that he is today and revered by millions because he stood on business, much like Ali, who stood on business. Let's not forget the reason why Muhammad Ali.
Colin Kaepernick anymore.
Yeah, but the reason why Muhammad Ali is
talking about Colin Kaepernick.
Can I get it out?
Kevin, you can't say that. You can't do that because how often during the week do you talk about Muhammad Ali? How often during the week do you talk about? I can't remember his name, but the brother who put his fist up at the Olympics. I can't remember his name. We don't talk about those men. We don't talk about those men day to day. So the fact that you're saying that, well, how often do we talk about Colin Kaepernick? That's not like
that has nothing.
There's no reason to even say that. We don't talk about those people every single day, but we do remember what they did. That's the point.
Exactly. That's my point. Thank you so much, Raven. So let me bring it all home. So when that situation went down with Colin Kaepernick, I turned the league off for years. I only came back within the last couple of years. And largely that was just because, I have friends and family who was into it, right? And so now they're doing this stuff. And I'm like, these guys ain't learned their lesson. They have not learned their lesson. And if anybody in our society could stand up to Donald Trump and withstand his culture war attacks, it's the NFL. They did us a disservice by doing that. It is not small. We keep trying to make things small so we can be comfortable to go back to sleep and entertain ourselves and watch the games. I'm not built like that.
Nathan, you're arguing the point of the smallness of the overall issue. I'm arguing the smallness of the action. You can't say eliminating DEI is comparable to removing end racism off of the end of the end zone because
that's not even the argument.
It's my argument. The cost benefit to the NFL is not the same. And that's what it boils down
But
to.
that means you're having a
Benefits.
conversation with yourself. Nobody has argued against that, Kevin. Nobody argued
Then I
against.
don't understand what we're talking about.
The conversation is the impact of the NFL making this decision, and then what we as individuals are going to do about it. You're
It
right.
has zero
A lot of
impact.
people are going to say no.
It
And some
has
people are
zero.
gonna
That's
say-
my point. It has zero
And
impact.
some people are going to say yes.
It has zero impact. It has zero impact. That's not going to impact anybody who's fighting for racial justice and equality. It's not going to impact the NFL's commitment to diversity or anything like that. What it does is it avoids having to go down this divisive and stupid rabbit hole that Donald Trump invariably would have taken the NFL and everybody else down. And it's avoiding a senseless discussion that ain't gonna change nothing.
Wait. How is discussing racism senseless?
Nathan, people gonna be discussing racism whether that gets pulled off the field or not. That's what I'm trying to say. This is a small potatoes thing.
Can I interject something here?
Sure, go right ahead.
If you think for 1 minute that the DEI program in the NFL is anything other than virtue signaling, I've got a bridge that I'd like to sell you, because the entire NFL is built on meritocracy. If you look at the individual team by team, and you look at the people in the front office, and you look at the people that are involved, they're not the Brown family, for instance. The only DEI there is a result of that if you happen to be Mike Brown's daughter or somebody that's affiliated with the Brown family. I think that, you can look at the Kraft family, you can look at any of these individual families, and they'll say they're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the only thing they're concerned about is hiring the people that they want to hire in order to win championships. And it has nothing to do with we're going to increase the number of women that we have working for us, the number of blacks that are working for us, anything. It's just virtue signaling on their part.
How do you know that? You don't know.
How do I know that?
Evidence.
What?
How do you know that?
How do you know that if they have a DEI program that's even going to be effective? Do they have any type of statistics that say, as a result of having this program, this is how much we have increased the number of women that work for us?
So you could take a look at, and a lot of people are critical of this, but you could take a look at the NFL's Rooney Rule that they instituted. A lot of people have a problem with that. Now, the Rooney Rule doesn't say that you have to hire black coaches. It simply says you have to interview them. And the reason why that rule was put in place is because many NFL owners and organizations weren't even interviewing black candidates. So that means that there were a lot of qualified black candidates who weren't even getting a look by NFL teams for exactly the reason that you just said. Ultimately, owners are going to hire who they want to hire. And it was evident for a number of years who owners wanted to hire were not black coaches, not because these black coaches weren't qualified, but you're right, Kevin. I don't know what the reasons were. I gotta leave it to some type of reasonable expectation that if you're not interviewing black coaches and black coaches are not getting jobs, how do you know you're hiring the best? How do you know you're hiring the best people? And why are black coaches being excluded from getting interviews and being included in the process? So there's something, you got to admit, there's something flawed with that has nothing to do with meritocracy. So the mere fact that the NFL has found, and what you've seen since they've instituted the Rooney Rule, is an increase in the number of black coaches. More black coaches are getting opportunities at head jobs, not because they're not meritorious or that they don't deserve it, because we know through the NFL every year, 5-6 coaches get fired every year. Most of them are white. Okay. So it has nothing to do with meritocracy. It's about giving people the opportunity to interview, be seen, and say they are competent. And so that is what DEI.
The mere fact that you say I'm going to waste somebody's time.
How is it a waste of time, Kevin? Look, I used to have mentors who would tell me all the time. They would say, hey, interview for this job, even if you don't think you get it, because it's a good experience for you to go through the process and understand what they're looking for. So when you come out of it, you know what you got to do to get better. You know how the bosses are thinking. So an interview is not a waste of somebody's time.
That's not even the best part of it.
In and of itself.
That's not even the best part of it. The best part of it, and why I like the Rooney Rule,
Kevin,
and
I
the reason
disagree
why I
with
think
that
you're starting
completely.
to see an uptick in black head coaches is because, you know, people, it's all about relationships. Like, you go in, you interview somebody, you might not get the job, but you've made a connection with them now, right? They've got a chance to sit down with you face to face, and therefore you might be somebody they might call upon in the future. It might not even be a head coaching job, it might be a coordinator job or something like that. So getting the opportunity to sit in front of people and interview and make connections is always a virtue.
All right. So under the Rooney Rule, that if I've got a head coaching job position open, so I'm going to pick some black coach and I'm going to interview, knowing full well that I'm not going to hire that person. So I'm basically wasting his time and I'm wasting my time.
How do you know the mindset of somebody else?
I would much rather in a position of saying, you know what? If you don't want to hire a black coach, hey, Pittsburgh, we'll hire Mike Tomlin, and then we'll just kick your ass and we'll show you how bad you are and how stupid your decision was. So I would much rather see it based on something like that to prove the point that, hey, the fact that you didn't want to even interview this guy, you're stupid, and now we're kicking your ass, and we're the one that was winning all the national championships.
So I love when Kevin offered these things, because it just reinforces why the need for DEI is there, because he just doesn't get it. And it's shocking to think that there may be so many more people who are making hiring decisions who have that narrow of a view. So let's time out. So it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time to interview. It's a waste of time to interview anybody who you don't think is going to get the job. So let's just take this hypothetical.
What I'm saying is that if you tell me that saying to an NFL team that you must interview somebody that you have no intention of hiring, well, then that's a waste of time.
It's not a waste of time.
First of all, any hiring process should be an open process. And quite frankly, it should be, if I don't think, and Phil correct me, is illegal if it's not. So I may have someone in mind.
If it's a government job, I wouldn't say that's true for the private sector.
Okay, well, it should be. I'll just say this, that if you are having any kind of open hiring process and you've already determined who you want to hire in the beginning, then posting a job and advertising it is really quite fruitless. And it's a waste of time.
That's my point.
In my mind, would be endemic of unfair business practices and discrimination. I think,
but businesses do it all the time because of what was once a legal obligation.
Yeah, there probably could be a legal case made for that if you could prove that exactly. A hiring process was essentially a sham. Okay. Being open to interviewing candidates means there's the possibility that somebody could come in and they could wow you. They could exceed your expectations. They could be better than the person you wanted to hire initially. And as someone who has done hiring, that has happened to me before, where I thought, oh, here's somebody who I think might be good for the job, but somebody else comes in and they're better than that person. I say, okay, well, this person is better. They wowed me with their presentation or their skills. And so that is why it is worthwhile going through the process. The other reason is that, hey, maybe you don't get that job, but there might be another job that becomes available or that's open that I say, hey, you weren't good enough to be my head coach, but my offensive coordinator position is open and you impressed me as the head coach. I want to bring you into the organization. Or the guy that I hired didn't work out, and 2 years down the road, I remembered the interview that you gave, and that interview was good. So I'm going to bring you back this time now and may hire you as a coach. So this suggestion that going through this process is a waste of time, I think is endemic to the idea of why, when these programs are not successful, it's not because of the program, it's because of the mentality of the people who
they're successful because of the people who were hired that proved that, yes, this person can do the job. I mean, back in the day, you're old enough to remember that there was at some point in time that people actually thought that African Americans weren't smart enough to be quarterbacks. Okay. I happen to play on a team at Xavier University that we had probably one of the first African American quarterbacks in the country. And he was a damn good quarterback because of his talent. And if that person goes on the field and proves that they have the talent, then that eliminates all the stereotypes.
But how do they do that if they're being denied at the door, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Because you go to the places where somebody will.
What if those places don't exist, Kevin? That's what you're not understanding.
It did, because Xavier University had the quarterback.
Yeah,
but you're not understanding
that's university. So every I'm sorry, Raven, go ahead, finish your point.
I'm just saying what Kevin is, and this is why he's having such a hard time wrapping his head around this, because he cannot fathom what it means to be denied access to a thing. You are a straight white male in America. There are very few things that you have been denied access to. And so when somebody's trying to have a conversation with you about what that is,
Raven, but that is one of the dumbest things that's ever come out of your mouth.
It's not. It's backed by fact and data. It's backed by fact and data.
You have no
idea. It's backed by fact and data. So I'm going to continue what I was saying.
There
are very few things in your lifetime that you have ever been denied access for. You might have been denied access maybe on the basis of economics, of your family or your economic background. But in other spaces, I guarantee you have very little instances in which you've actually been denied access to a thing. And so when it comes to these conversations, when we're talking about the things that have been put in place to make the playing ground, the playing ground level and for everybody involved, you have a hard time wrapping your head around these concepts, because we understand what it means to have to fight through being constantly barred access to things. This is why things like DEI and affirmative action are important, because without them, we would have never gotten the opportunity. And you don't understand that.
What I have a tough time wrapping my head around is having the concept of something that would say, I would never not interview somebody simply because I've got some sort of a prejudice. I would interview anybody for any position. And
you might, Kevin. You might, but there are institutions who do not, who will not, unless they are forced to do so.
That I have had very little opportunities denied me. You have no clue what you're talking about.
I do. I'm a black woman in America. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's my life.
I am black and female and fat in America. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
You don't even need to go there with Kevin to make the argument that you're going to want to make. I'm going to draw from Malcolm X, and I'm just going to use the words that Kevin used against him to help him see this point. We don't even need to get into what Kevin's been denied versus what we've been denied. Kevin said the Xavier program had the black quarterback. So this is the problem that we have in our society, is Kevin wants to point to the one program where they did have it, while ignoring the thousands of other programs across the country where that same black quarterback could not go and get access. So the reality is then, and what Kevin is saying is that instead of breaking up the system that says that every black quarterback that wants to play now has to go to Xavier or these handful of places that will accept the black quarterback, instead of every one of them being open and eliminating the prejudice and discrimination, this is the mentality that exists in this country. Yeah. Black folk ought to be satisfied with the crumbs, the handful of places where you can go and get what you want, versus everything being fair. And
why do you have to have everything? No. Why do we have to give you access to everything? Why do you think you deserve access to everything? That's what he's saying.
Xavier, I should be able to go to UC. I should be able to go to daggone Harvard.
I have never met anybody that is narrow-minded as you. What you're saying is that I am saying that, accept the crumbs that you can come to Xavier University.
That's what you just said. You said black people need to go where they will be accepted.
Is that at that time, what you said? What I said, and if you'd shut up a minute and let me, and here I go again, you're pissing me off.
There are three other people on this podcast that heard what you said.
Yeah, because the three of you are once again.
Phil, what did he say about access?
Are you going to let me finish? Are you going to let me finish?
What did who say about access? What did he say about access?
If you're going to tell me that what I'm saying is accepting the crumbs, that is a narrow view. That was never.
That's what you said, Kevin.
What I said was that Xavier University had a black quarterback. Now, I don't know how many other institutions had black quarterbacks, but what happens, there always has to be a first. And once that quarterback proved that, yes, I can be a quarterback and a damn good quarterback, then other people said, well, you know what? We're missing out on this. And so now we're going to start looking at these because somebody broke the mold. And what I'm saying is that you break the mold and then you shove it down their throats because, hey, if you don't want me here, then I will go over here. And when we play, I will be kicking your ass. That's
Kevin, you don't know that you're saying this, but while what you just said, what you're actually saying is black people should have to struggle to get to positions of access and power to prove themselves worthy of the positions that they want to have.
That's not what I said.
That's what you just said.
No.
You just
Here's
basically
what Kevin
laid out a
said.
metaphor that basically said, well, we gave this blackie a chance, and if he's good enough, it might change the mind of these other races, organizations, and they might let blacks through the ranks.
I've ever heard.
They might let blacks through the ranks.
Is this what you just said? This blackie? Is that what you said?
I'm being hyperbolous. I'm being hyperbolous, Kevin. Don't get caught up in it.
So
I'm being hyperbolous.
University
Don't get caught up. The fact that you're offended by blackie and I'm not is hilarious right now. I just want you to know that. The fact that you're offended by that word and I'm not, and Nathan's not, and Kevin's not, that's hilarious.
I'll say this.
I'm being hyperbolous right now. Everybody else knew that. What I'm saying that you don't understand, Kevin, is that you're explaining a situation in which minorities and black people specifically, we have to somehow prove ourselves worthy enough of even having access, and that is not an okay mentality to have.
You're assuming that nobody else has to prove their worth.
No, Kevin, you're not hearing what Raven is saying. You're not hearing what Raven is saying.
And of course, Raven's not hearing what I'm saying.
Let me just say that. Let me just say this, Kevin, is that let's just use your football team example. If you are talented enough to make the team, right? You have an opportunity to win a position through practice, theoretically, through practice and different things of that nature. And you win your opportunity to get on the field, right? Generally through practice and your talent showing through practice and competition within the practice realm. And then you get your opportunity to prove in a game against competition whether you can hang on to that job. That's typically how sports tends to work. Back in the day, if you were black, even if you were on the team, even if I was balling out in practice and showing in practice that I was a better player, I was still going to be denied even the opportunity to get a chance on the field to show that not only can I win the job, but I can keep the job, because there was a degree of thinking back then that black guys could not play quarterback, or even before Jackie Robinson or others broke the color barrier, because there was all sorts of evidence. You could see how black people were playing in the Negro leagues back then. There was no deficit of information and proof that black people were more than qualified to compete against whites, but it was racism, plain and simple, that denied them even the access to prove. So this notion of meritocracy that we so love in sports and all of that, I always say these are great concepts if you're white. But if you're black, you understand these concepts have always been a myth because color has been a barrier.
We've always been great. Y'all just figured it out.
It's less so. It's much less so in competition these days. I think anybody would have to unquestionably admit that sports these days are much, much more a meritocracy than it was back then, because you've broken the color barrier and all of these different things. But I will still say this. We've seen from LeBron James' son, who we would definitely say is not up to the quality and the caliber of skills to play in the NBA. He's getting opportunities to play that other players are not going to get, who are more skilled than him because of who his dad is. That ain't got nothing to do with merit. So I will say, by and large, that's true. But we cannot ignore that there are still pockets of unfairness that take place that ain't got nothing to do with merit.
So there's
Did you just admit that I was right about Bronny James? Is that what you just did?
Well,
you just admit that I was right about Bronny James?
I agree with you at the time. I don't think
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
I said it was a nice visual, but I agreed. I agree with you. I said
I am wearing off
the
on you.
only
I
reason
love it,
Bronny
bro.
was there because of his dad. I agree. I
Hey.
think I agree with you.
I remember that conversation.
You wearing
If we
off
go
of me
back
too,
and
bro.
review the tape, I'll apologize if I
Oh,
said
no
something
apology
different.
necessary, man. It's all the conversation.
I'm
Kevin,
saying you right now. If I was saying you was wrong,
Kevin
then
G,
I'm saying you right
Kevin
now.
G is dead wrong. That's the most important thing. Kevin G is dead wrong. He's dead. That's the only thing that matters. You're wrong, bro. I love you, but you're wrong. You're wrong.
Well, once again, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But okay.
Let's move on here. That was a good
I am magnanimous enough to allow you to wallow in your ignorance without thinking less of you. So there you go.
Thank you for that.
So
thank you for that.
And that's
but the bottom line is
here.
their bottom line is there always has to be the first in anything.
Can I move on now?
Can you? I can't know that I don't know that I can name the first successful Jewish quarterback for crying out loud.
Glickman. No. Oh, what's his name? Glickman. Sid Luckman. I think Chicago Bears. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get competitive.
Okay.
Were Jews barred from the NFL or MLB or anything like that? Was there ever?
Jews were barred from an awful lot of things in this country for a long period of time.
Sure, I don't know the history.
As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, your grand and glorious party of the DNC passed over a Jewish man to run for president this time in
it
Ben
wasn't because he was Jewish,
or
though.
even passed up to be vice president because he was Jewish.
I'll tell you an interesting story.
If that's true, hey Kevin, if that's true, if that's the reason.
Not Ben Shapiro. What's the guy's name from? What's the guy's name? Not Ben, but it's
Bernie
Shapiro
from Pennsylvania.
He might have been a different.
Kevin, I happen to agree with you. I think Ben Shapiro would have been a far superior vice presidential candidate than what was his name, Tim Walz. I agree with you.
Debate especially, you might be right about that. And he probably would have helped him carry Pennsylvania.
Isn't it Josh Shapiro?
Josh Shapiro. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro's the conservative, but thank you very much.
So let me move on some local issues here. I want to talk about this proposal that I know people are going to have some really strong opinions about. But remember that railway money? Remember that? The sale of the railway? And there was so much conversation and talk about how the money should be spent, and there's rules to it and things you can't do and can't do. Well, now you've got at least one member of City Council and perhaps others that are supporting the idea of taking some of that rail money and spending it in what they are calling undeserved neighborhoods. They're calling it the Rising 15. And,
underserved, not
underserved neighborhoods. Thank you. For
undeserved.
And people are saying that this is a good idea, and some people are saying that this is a betrayal of what council said this money was going to be spent on. And quick, I think you can see on the screen, I read, the proposal seeks to each year allocate 10% of the annual return on sale proceeds to improve existing infrastructure and spend $25 million from the fund over time on new infrastructure in the 15 neighborhoods. I can run through a list of what those neighborhoods are, but I want to get your thoughts. Those neighborhoods are Roll Hill, Millvale, English Woods, Lower Price Hill, Queensgate, Whitten Hills, South Fairmount, West End, East Westwood, Avondale, Roselawn, Mount Airy, East Price Hill, South Cumminsville, and North Fairmount. Some people are saying, wait a minute, that's against the rules, right? You're not allowed to do that. But what do you think? Is this a good idea?
It's a horrible idea, Nathan. I'm going to tell you why. And here's why you can't get caught up in the argument for the underserved communities. Okay. Because that's where people will go. And I think a lot of people will look at, when you name those neighborhoods, a lot of those are Black neighborhoods, and they'll immediately go to, hey, this money is going to underserved Black neighborhoods, and that's a good thing. And this is why the city should do that. But here's why this is a bad idea, because this is exactly what people who were against the railroad trust fund to begin with were afraid of. City council doing exactly this kind of thing. Jan Michelle Kearney is presenting this as a money swap, right? So the railroad money is not directly going to these new projects in these neighborhoods, mainly because it can't. That's in the the ballot language that's in the state law that you can't spend the railroad money on new infrastructure. You can only do it on existing infrastructure. So what Jan Michelle Kearney is proposing is, well, this 25 million or whatever that we would have had to use in the capital fund for these road projects or other things for existing infrastructure where we have a maintenance deficit. We'll take that money and we'll use it on new projects, and then we'll just replace that money with the railroad money, and we won't be in violation of the law because that money will be used for the current infrastructure projects that we now won't spend the capital budget money on. And that's cool right now when you're talking about Black neighborhoods getting money. But it's not going to be cool when the arena folks come to the city and say, well, hey, why don't we take $100 million or $200 million out of the capital budget? And I'm just tossing these numbers out here. I'm not saying that's what it is, but at any amount of money, once you start talking about taking the capital budget money and using it for new existing projects that people don't want, like an arena or other things like that, and council starts saying, well, we'll just replace that money with the railroad money. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The city sold the railroad sale money as we have a deficit on existing infrastructure. We got existing roads and bridges and stuff that's crumbling. And this railroad money is going to be extra money that's going to allow us to catch up, not build new stuff. Okay, not build new stuff, but catch up on the deficit that we're in. What Jan Michelle Kearney is proposing, and these council members who support that, is not necessarily moving us forward on the deficit, catching up on the deficit, but at best is going to allow us to tread water or make smaller incremental improvements on the crumbling infrastructure that already exists. It's a bad idea. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it's a bait and switch on what the city council members sold the taxpayers when they voted for it. And that's really all it is just, and she labeled it correctly. It's a money swap. That's exactly what it is. It's taking money that's in the capital budget already, and we're going to take that and we're going to use that on something new, and we're going to replace that money with railroad money. How does that get us any farther along in dealing with the deferred maintenance that we have? Now, I don't know. I'll open it up to the rest of you guys, and you can say what you think.
Yeah, I mean, all good points, but my question would be, let's be real here. We all adults. They're going to dip into this money anyway. Like everything you said about the arenas, they're going to come for that anyway. So shouldn't we line up these neighborhoods first? Because this is going to happen, right?
That's not the point, though. That's not the point, though. And if they come for the arena money, people should, in the same way that I'm saying they should reject this, people should stand up and say they should reject that, because that is not.
But it's going to happen, though.
That is not what they told taxpayers when they put the ballot to pass it. And
you
so
are right.
What you're saying is, well, hey, if the Black neighborhoods are going to get it, then it's okay for city council or whoever to break promises, to run a bait and switch, to run a shell game on the taxpayers, that's okay because Black folks in Black neighborhoods is benefiting. And I will stand on business and say that is a horrible, horrible position.
Yeah, it might be, but I think the more pragmatic approach would be, look, we all grown folks. They are going to dip into this money eventually. It is going to happen, right? So why not line up this rising 15, these neighborhoods, and let them get in the line first and get a piece of this money that they're going to cut into for some projects, some arena, or something else eventually anyway?
I don't know. I see both sides of this argument. I remember when we were gearing up to vote on this issue in the local election, and it was a very heated topic because people were very upset. Number one, that the community had no say so in the initial putting together of this sale of the railroad. That was the number one issue that people were very upset about when this all came together. And so, to Kevin's point, we have now as a city, we have voted, as a county, we have voted to make sure that this sale goes through. I think that it is irresponsible of council to then do something else with that money other than what they said they were going to do with it. Because number one, the people were already upset with not being involved in the decision making in the first place. And so when you do something like a money swap or a bait and switch, it just further it further instills a distrust for our local government when you make those kind of moves. And I get the intention behind it. Like Kevin said, it's good intention. I 100% want those neighborhoods to be able to benefit from some sort of financial gain in the way of, either supporting existing infrastructure or creating new things as far as infrastructure goes. Like, I get the sentiment behind that. I get the desire for that. But you have to be very careful in that if you also want to protect the integrity of the relationship between voters and council members, between voters and local government. We already have a high amount of distrust. You don't stoke that distrust by trying to do something good with trickery. I think that's a very slippery slope. And like Kevin said, when it does come time for somebody else to want to dip their fingers into the pot and try to use that money for something that it was not allocated for, if we agree to this, we have no footing to be upset with whatever else they try to do with that money outside of what it was allocated for. So I think that, again, it's a good idea in sentiment, but in application and execution, it is going to become a problem. And we are going to as voters, as people who choose who we put on city council and we choose them as our representatives, it is not going to do anything as far as strengthening that relationship that we have with our council members, because it's not very strong right now. A lot of people are very upset with council and some of the things that have been happening with it in the last couple of years. I don't think this move is the move that is going to be the one that repairs that relationship. I think that there has to be another way to get this done. We have to find another way. I want those neighborhoods to benefit, but not if it comes at the cost of the integrity, like I said, of the relationship that we have with our council members. I don't think that it's a good idea. It just doesn't seem like it's going to fare well.
But you know what I remember? I remember as a part of that conversation, there were a lot of people that didn't want to vote for it because there was nothing that was specifically earmarked for Black folks, and in particular, some of these neighborhoods. So for those people, they're getting what they actually wanted, right? They wanted something to be earmarked for certain neighborhoods that they felt had been underserved. And so I don't think they're going to have a problem with this. But Kevin, Phil, let you guys jump in there.
I can tell you that when I was on city council, whenever there's a pot of money, everybody shows up with their hand out.
Yeah.
Okay. Always happens. And it's always a race thing. Okay. I remember something, I think it was called the Opportunity Zone, where somehow we had about $25 million. And where the heck that went, you tell me. Okay. And so my experience would say the less council gets involved with this, the better. Okay, because when they start getting involved, whether it's focusing on certain neighborhoods or often they're putting pressure on the administration. Hey, this guy, he's a developer. He needs a helping hand. Will you talk to him? You know what I mean? And so this was supposed to be to fix current infrastructure. I would leave it to the administration, the professionals, and I actually think most of the people, at least when I was there, in the engineering department, they are pretty professional, pretty skilled. I say let them decide where the infrastructure issues are. I think the less council gets involved, the better.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. Remember we went through this whole thing. AFTAB went around the city, went into the rec center. Oh, this rec center got rats and it's in such disrepair. And they went on this whole sob tour around the city about all of the maintenance that needed to be, the existing maintenance that needed to be done, right? And that was their selling pitch to the general public. And the general public's response was, we don't trust y'all because we know what's going to happen. Y'all going to try to come out and you're going to come up with your pet projects. And pet projects, whether it's the Black community, whether it's the arena or whatever, every council member got their own little pet project or thing that they pushing for, right? That ain't what they sold the voters. They sold the voters, hey, we're $400 million behind on maintenance, and this is going to allow us to catch up. So here's what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that there may never come a point where the city is able to take money from the capital budget and do that swap. But at the very least, it should be after they've taken care of the $400 million in deferred maintenance that they told taxpayers that they were going to take care of with this railroad money. So you should not be trying to swap, divert, or do anything until you have delivered. And I'm sure that there's plenty of deferred maintenance in those 15 rising neighborhoods that they could be pointing to. So on this one, I kind of agree with Phil. So instead of trying to use socioeconomic factors and other things, you told the people on fix. So let's look at what roads, what bridges are in dire repair, where people could actually get hurt, where there are actually real situations that we need to fix, and focus in on that. And then once you've caught up with the deferred maintenance, and if the returns on the railroad money are that good, then you can start looking at doing those types of swaps and putting in new projects and stuff. But you owe it to the taxpayers to do what you promised before you start trying to figure out slick ways to move money around and get what you want to get done. And I hate to say that because there's nothing more than I would love to see improvements come to underserved communities. But right is right. And just because it's going to black folks, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change my position on that.
Nate, you remember that conversation we was having a few weeks ago? We was having a conversation about whether or not Democrats should start playing dirty. Remember we was having that conversation and the very slippery slope that comes with when you start doing trickery and very dirty things in politics. And I'm not saying this is dirty, but it kind of straddled the fence a little bit. If we as voters have decided with our vote that this issue that you've presented to us, that this is what we want, and the way that you've allocated that this money that we have because of this sale is going to be used in this way, and you then turn around and say to us, well, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. Even if it's with a good intention, it still sets a precedent for a very slippery slope to where now we have to consider every time we go and vote, are they actually going to do with this money, or they're actually going to do with our vote what we asked them or what we said or allocated for them to do with it. I don't want to take that chance. As a voter, I don't want to take that chance that every time I go and I vote yes on an issue or no on an issue, the people who are to be held accountable for making sure that my vote is heard and that however it turns out that exactly what was explained in this issue was exactly what's going to happen, that they decide to do some moving the goalposts or some trickery or some swapping around, that doesn't make a confident voter out of me. And so to avoid that, and to continue to, again, build up the confidence and the integrity of who we put in these positions of power, you can't do stuff like this. I get the sentiment, bro. I get it. I want these underserved communities to be served, to be advantaged, to be benefited, but not if it comes with that compromising of that integrity between me, the voter, and who I voted for. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Let me give you a quick example. Can I give you a quick example of, and this wasn't necessarily infrastructure, but there was I won't use, he shall remain nameless, okay? But he pushed real hard for the city to set up this agency. I won't even give the name of it, but it was a nonprofit, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. And he convinced the city to fund this. Well, guess what? He left city council, okay? And guess who became the director of that agency at about $180,000 a year, okay? Same person, all right? So, again, I guess I'm agreeing with Kevin here and Reagan, but I think we have to be very careful about this, very cautious about these kind of things, so the money doesn't end up in the wrong places.
And you gotta think long term too, Nathan. Is that what I know is while you may think you're benefiting with small crumbs right now, and trust me, that's what this is. Whatever they're talking about spending on these 15 rising neighborhoods right now is going to be small crumbs in comparison to when the big fish come looking for this money. It ain't going to even be comparable. And then you're not going to have a moral ground to stand on when you want to buck up and say, well, the black neighborhoods didn't get this. Look at what y'all giving the FC or whoever, the arena and the Cincinnati Bengals and the Red, look what they getting. The black neighborhood didn't get that. That's always the argument. That's always the argument. Nathan,
who are you impersonating? That person is going to come after you. You did a horrible impersonation, bro.
Who?
You. That was a terrible impersonation of whoever that is. But go.
I'm just glad I didn't do it.
That was Tim Scott.
That was
I
Tim
don't
Scott.
know. It
Impression
sounded pretty good to me.
That was Tim Scott.
That was my Tim Scott impression. Okay. But that's
Okay, well,
what
you were spot on then, bro. You were spot on.
that's what it always comes down to is you open this Pandora's box that in the end, it may seem like it's benefiting black folks right now, but at the end of the day, it's not. There's always a bigger fish waiting down the line with a bigger hook and a bigger pot that they gonna want, and black folk gonna have an issue with it. And what you're not gonna be able to do is say anything because you got your crumbs.
We're gonna say something. We're gonna say something.
You
Anyway.
gonna, yeah, but you ain't gonna have you ain't gonna have ground to stand on. No,
Oh,
you ain't gonna have ground.
You guys are looking at this all wrong, and I'm gonna tell you all about yourself in 1 second. But I'm gonna let Kevin G go first.
Well, I have to say that I agree with Raven and I agree with Kevin on this issue because this is what the taxpayers and what they voted on. But I would add to that, why with the administration that has been in charge of Cincinnati for as many years as they have been in charge, why do we have any underserved communities in Cincinnati?
Okay,
Doesn't that tell you about the wrong direction that this city council as a whole for a number of years has been doing? And the fact that you actually
that's a misleading conclusion you're making. Underserved. That's misleading.
Well, I'm not the one that called them underserved. They're
Right.
the
I'm
ones
referring to those
so.
who use that
But
term.
I'm saying that why do we have any underserved communities in Cincinnati? Because of the administration that we have had in Cincinnati.
But
for
you're
all these
assuming
years.
that
Maybe
they
they
are
should go back and rethink the
underserved.
whole idea of some of the projects that they have undertaken and how the areas where they have spent money. I go back to the time when you may remember when they were talking about school levies and all this. And I think, that's probably even goes back to the Benger Commission. Remember the former head of Fifth Third, where they took a look at all of these schools and all of a sudden, Shazam, lo and behold, we've had all these years where we've had these budgets. We've had, every time you do a budget, you have a amount of money for salaries and repairs and maintenance. And then all of a sudden we're not going to do this maintenance this year. We'll defer it to the next year. And when you add up all this deferred maintenance because you've in effect wasted the money for the previous years, then you come back to the taxpayers and say, we need a school levy to really do away with all of our mismanagement from the previous years. This is where accountability comes in as far as what the people have elected in the city of Cincinnati and where there should be in these individual communities and some of the more influential people that are part of the city of Cincinnati, where they start asking for accountability from the city council to why we have underserved communities.
That is a really good question. Yeah, I agree with you. Why do we have underserved communities?
Yeah, but you're making an assumption that we do have underserved communities.
Yeah, I am.
And I would respectfully disagree because that implies that, and I've heard this for years, and I heard it all the time I was on city council, that because a neighborhood, usually because it's African American and poor, that therefore the city is, quote, not doing enough, as if they're doing more for other neighborhoods. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, it is unfortunate we have neighborhoods.
They do, Phil. They do, Phil.
Admit you can just simply look at the city budget from year to year. And I mean, it's like they say, your checkbook will tell you what you treasure. And there's without question, if you look at how the city has elected to spend dollars and which neighborhoods, receive what dollars from the city, that is a testament to what parts of the city certain councils or certain councils.
Examined this? Kevin, you've examined this?
No, Phil, I haven't. I can't sit here and say today that I've done a in-depth look into how much the city has spent historically in neighborhoods. And some of this is anecdotal or certainly a sense or a feeling. But I think one can look at, what neighborhoods in Cincinnati generally tend to be thriving and which ones have been disinvested in. So there's a difference between underserving and one could say underserving and then just not making any investment at all or doing things to kind of help, neighborhoods support themselves or get over. And I certainly think that there's evidence in many neighborhoods in Cincinnati of neglect or disinvestment, by city government in Cincinnati over the years. Otherwise, we would, if that weren't the case, we wouldn't have some neighborhoods that are doing so incredibly well and other neighborhoods that are doing so incredibly bad.
So you're assuming it's because the ones that are doing better, you're saying the city's putting more money and you're making that assumption. So
can you what neighborhood would you say that the city has probably put in? Let's just take downtown, for instance. How much money do you think the city of Cincinnati has put into downtown comparatively to other neighborhoods?
I haven't looked at it, but I would assume significantly more. I would assume.
Okay, so just by you admitting that, there's already that by the nature of that, money that is being invested in downtown at such a high clip is money that's not going to some other neighborhood.
Yeah, but
what neighborhoods are more likely to not get? Now, council can make a decision. They can say, let's just say for the sake of argument, downtown is getting $100 million. Okay. They don't have to give downtown $100 million. They could give downtown $75 million and spend $25 million someplace else and tell 3CDC or whomever else downtown, hey, you figure out how to make up the other $25 million to make this happen. They could say that. They don't, but they could. And that's what I'm saying. Like when council makes choices, when they make choices about where they're going to spend money, they're going to invest in certain places and not invest in others. And so when you invest $100 million in downtown, you're making a conscious decision not to put all of that money.
But you also have to look at return on investment. You have to look at return on investment. And generally the reason why we've put more money downtown is because we have decided, I think there's truth to this, that more and more people are going to be, the earnings tax is going to bring in a lot more money. So ultimately that investment is going to be a sound investment itself. So it isn't just, we're favoring the big business guys. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, Phil, because I think that absolutely is what it is. And I think that some on council have decided that investment in certain neighborhoods brings more return than investment in other neighborhoods. And that's why they decide to spend money. And so neighborhoods where they feel like, hey, there's a return if we spend money in Hyde Park, there's not going to be a return if we spend money in Price Hill or in Avondale. There's not going to be the same return. So more money is going to go to Hyde Park. That's exactly the calculation that council makes. But how are these underserved neighborhoods ever expected to get to a point of profitability and benefit if that's always the way that council looks at spending money?
But Kevin, you're doing a lot of speculating. I sincerely mean this. I think whether you or somebody else, I think we ought to be doing some kind of a study about this before we start assuming that, these poor neighborhoods, the city's putting a lot less in than they are in Hyde Park. I don't know, but I think it ought to be studied a little more before making those kind of broad generalizations.
So they're not so broad. So let's just take tax abatements, for example. How many tax abatements do you think, and these are taxes that the city could collect, right? That the city could collect and that they're owed, that they're foregoing.
Not necessarily. No, that's not necessarily true, because a lot of times the reason they're able to get a business to come into the city is because of the tax payment. Without it, the company would go to Indianapolis.
Perhaps that's what we think. It's sort of the same. It's sort of the same speculation.
Very competitive.
It's sort of the same speculation that we use when we give the Bengals millions of dollars for a new stadium under the belief that they'll leave Cincinnati and go to someplace.
That you're right about. I've said that before.
Yeah. So it's the same thing that doesn't really have any proof other than the word of the company. And we know that there's a high probability that they could
pretty much demonstrate. You can in fact require when you make those deals for them to hire a certain number of people, have a certain payroll. So to some extent you can.
Yeah. And most of the time, many companies we've done that and some haven't met it. And sometimes they get away scot-free.
When they don't, we try to claw it back.
Yeah, but not all the time successfully, admittedly.
True.
So it's money out the door. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, and all tax abatements don't just go to businesses. We see that there have been some residences, some developers and residences that have gotten tax abatements as well. So what I'm saying is if you look at just simply that, there are certain,
which by the way brings in property tax that we might not have. But go ahead.
Sure, I'm just saying. But again, all of this is speculation and saying that if we did these things in other communities, you don't know that you wouldn't be netting the same results.
It is speculation.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So
Phil,
all of
Phil,
it's speculation.
yeah.
But I
But
think
for you, Phil,
I think we're all smart people and can look at a situation and say, maybe if we watered the grass over here a little bit in this neighborhood, it actually might grow, because
the reason is,
watering the grass has been proven more times than not to produce a healthy.
Put it this way, again, I haven't studied it, but I will say when I was on city council, every time there was an issue about this, the council by and large opted for putting money into the so-called underserved or low income or what do you want neighborhoods. Okay, they were the ones that had the political influence. Okay, and so, but again, I'm not claiming that they got more money because I haven't studied it, but I wouldn't necessarily assume that the cities put much more money into Hyde Park than they have in Avondale. I wouldn't assume it.
Yeah.
Now maybe private
developers.
Maybe private developers, aside from any city's subsidy, maybe they have chosen to put money wherever in Hyde Park and not in Avondale. That's possible. But when you say when you say underserved, I think you're really referring to what the city of Cincinnati is doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're talking about. I'm reading directly from the article, so these are the words of council members themselves. So, however you want to, conceive it in your head as to what that means to be underserved, these neighborhoods are underserved. And to that point,
that's what one council member calls them. That doesn't mean the city has neglected that neighborhood. It's basically what they're saying is they're saying they're probably low income and, as Kevin said, African American. That's
probably red line.
What they're saying.
So
probably lack of investment, lack of tax abatements, red line. Probably a lot of things going on.
But you're making assumptions. I'm not sure that's true.
But for the sake of the conversation, I don't have a problem with what Jan Michelle Kearney has offered.
Nathan, let me say this before you give your
go
take.
ahead.
You may want to respond to this as well in like 5 seconds. So one of the writers into the Inquirer who criticized this, and this is another good point, is that which kind of supports what Phil is saying. I think if council insists on moving in this direction, they do need to provide more facts, more data that supports these communities being underserved, as Phil has suggested. Right now, they're telling you, not showing you. They're telling you, and one might say, "Hey, if I drive around, I can look around." But it's better if you come to taxpayers and voters with facts versus feelings. And that's a lot harder to argue against. So if council is going to insist on going down this path, which I don't think they should, but if they do, at the very least, they need to produce some hard data that makes the points kind of that we're making about the disinvestment or the lack of investment.
Well, and also specifically allocate what they're sending the money in to do. Like, if you're going to go down this route, you also need to be specific about what it is that you're going to allocate this money to do specifically in these neighborhoods. What are the issues that you are hoping to address?
I'm so glad you got in and said that, bro. I'm glad you said that. So assuming, just for the sake of our conversation here, and I do agree that council should do that if they're going to go down this road, I don't have a problem with it. Because my question is, well, why are these, if they show us statistical data that these 15 neighborhoods are in fact underserved, it begs the
what's
question,
your definition of underserved? What's your definition?
Whatever that might be, once they show this data.
But it's important because you're using underserved as a prerequisite.
I'm using underserved because that's the language that Jan Michelle Kearney used.
So again, to Phil's point, if council comes back with some data, and let's just say over the last 20 years, okay, since 2000, let's just use that as a benchmark. So if council goes back and they say, since 2000, we've looked at all 52 of Cincinnati's neighborhoods, and these are the 15 neighborhoods that have received the least amount of money from the city of Cincinnati to help with various infrastructure projects or things, investment in their neighborhood, that these are the bottom 15. And so we're going to start with these in terms of using some of this money again, which I don't agree they should do. But if they, like I said, if they go down this, like, this is the way of making the case, because to Phil's point, underserved is kind of a nebulous term, right? You I tried to assign my definition of what MAGA is based on what I said. City needs to put some criteria based on their underserved, the nature,
and what that is,
and
what that means, right?
Socioeconomic data. Let the people know what that data is.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's as simple as saying that, okay, we've got 52 neighborhoods here and go from top to bottom who's received the most money. I mean, you can have a very underfunded neighborhood that doesn't get a whole lot of money that is not underserved. I
Well,
mean,
let's
I
say
was
they're
gonna make that point
neglected.
as well. Just
Well,
because
what they need
that
to
neighborhood
do,
received the least money don't mean that
right?
it's not underserved. Or you know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like there are certain neighborhoods that probably don't require as much financial support in terms of infrastructure. We gonna be pissed if we find out that Hyde Park or Seven Hills or whatever, one of those affluent neighborhoods that we like to refer to as such or whatever, has actually received maybe the least money in terms of infrastructure, and so they get wrapped into that 15 lowest
Right.
underfinanced community. Like that's not gonna solve the problem that we're trying
You
to
know what,
solve.
Raven?
I think
When it
what
comes
city
to
of
tax
Cincinnati
abatements, what they
needs to
found was the
do,
exact opposite. What they found in terms of city tax abatements is that the majority was going to neighborhoods like Hyde Park. And so when the mayor
Who
came up
found?
with
I'm
this,
sorry. Who found?
the city found this, right? They got a website, they did the whole
Saying it's
thing.
a report somewhere.
Yeah, reports, the whole 9 yards. It's all up on their website. If you want to find it out, you can check it out. How do I know? Well, I mean, I spoke with the mayor about it. He had a whole public meeting in which they talked about all this information, and they found exactly that, right? You would think it would be the opposite, but what they found is Hyde Park and neighborhoods like that were getting more tax abatements. So let's bring it all back home. I think this is great. This is great. The city should absolutely show us the data. And if they can show us data that these neighborhoods have been underserved or redlined or neglected or forgotten or whatever it is, I have absolutely no problem, right? Even though you can call it a bait and switch, because I'm sure the road to getting these neighborhoods where they are, there's been a lot of broken promises and neglects, a whole lot of bait and switch that didn't benefit them. I'd have no problem with spending some of this money because, as I keep telling you folks, they're going to do this eventually anyway. So why
yeah, but
not
it shouldn't
line
be
up
done
people
within the
who have
first 2
been
years.
forgotten? If statistically we can find out that they've been forgotten, if that's empirical data, why not line up the people who have been forgotten and let them get a piece of this pie
Well, because it
before
gets back to
FC
Kevin's point.
Cincinnati or
It
the
is a
next
bait and
arena
switch. It is a
idea
bait and
or
switch.
wherever else comes in there
Well,
and takes the
and it
money.
doesn't justify even that, as I think
does
Kevin said, it
justify
doesn't
it.
justify bait and switch. When you commit to the voters, if you vote for this is what we're going to do. You need to stick to it.
Y'all do it. Politicians do it all the time.
Yeah, but that's one of the things, to Raven's point, that's one of the reasons why people don't trust politicians. And this council in particular, again, is what you run on. These council members ran on, we ain't like that. To borrow a line from Kendrick Lamar, they not like us.
Yeah.
Those politicians that came before us who did all the corruption and that ain't us. And yet, and still kind of looks like to some degree,
You think this is corruption?
Y'all ain't stealing money, but you still deceiving the taxpayers on what you said you was gonna do. Then you turn around and doing something else, and so that does nothing to heighten the trust that people have in it. And I don't disagree with you, Nathan. I think eventually, at some point, it will get to this point where people are
no
going
doubt
to
about it, bro.
People are going to come. People are going to come
happen.
looking. People are going to come looking for the money. And I'm not even saying that these neighborhoods shouldn't get that money, but it should be after the city has caught up. Catch up on that $400 million of deferred maintenance.
That's a decade away, bro. These neighborhoods can't wait a decade.
Take care of.
Catch up on that. Sounds good, but these neighborhoods can't wait a decade. That's a decade away to pay off $400 million.
Well, then, Nathan, they should have said something different when they was running. They should have been straight up with the people and gave them the option that, hey, we might use some of this money. We might do a bait and switch and use it in neighborhoods. You know why they didn't want to say that, Nathan? Because it wouldn't have passed if they had said that.
Well, let me say this.
Because you know why? The same people that voted for it would have said, well, I know y'all coming for this arena money. The arena gonna come for, and black folks would have been front and center not voting for it. Because the majority of black people already didn't want it to pass.
That's a very cynical way of looking at it. Maybe that could have happened. It could be there was like, well, we knew we was gonna do this the whole time. But I don't read Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney like that. The way I read her is, and I remember this, there was a big conversation primarily from black folks who said, I don't want to vote on this because it's not going to be earmarked specifically for the neighborhoods that I think it should be earmarked. Maybe Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney said, look, I'm listening to you. I hear you. So here's an idea.
Why not run on that? Why not run on that why not run on that during the campaign?
Because it was, well, you got to put things in their place, right? This came up as a consequence of the conversation. She was already on. She was already on.
Don't do that, man. Now, you're not being honest there. During the whole campaign, and I know we held a town hall forum on this, and the same group of people that you're talking about those neighborhoods, they showed up in force there. They called the mayor and the railroad people liars and all sorts of other names, said they didn't trust them, all of this type of stuff.
And what were they asking?
It was apparent. It was apparent.
What were they asking for, Kevin?
It was apparent to anybody who would listen where those folks stood. So what I'm saying is,
what were they asking for, Kevin?
So again, my point, Nathan, if the main people who are saying don't vote for this are saying we're not going to vote for this because stuff is not earmarked for the Black community, then why then? Why not say then, well, you know what? Once we get this passed, we're going to take care of y'all. Then you might have had even more people who would have voted for it.
But that's what they said. Scotty Johnson, I remember him being on. Wait. I remember Scotty Johnson being on the Lincoln Ware show saying, I'm going to make sure that this railroad money comes to our neighborhood.
Scotty Johnson wasn't on to pass the railroad campaign. Scotty Johnson wasn't on the pass. Scotty Johnson is one man. I'm talking about your mayor, the railroad board. This money is not going to be spent on Johnson new projects. That's what they said.
So is Jan Michelle Living Kearney. See, I'm just saying, I'm just looking at it differently. You seem to be saying that this was like a bait and switch. They knew they were going to do this all along. Maybe so.
No,
maybe they listened to the community, Kevin.
I think
maybe they. Can I finish?
Go ahead.
Maybe they listened to the community, and the community said, "Nah, if we vote on this, I want you to make sure some of this money comes back to our neighborhoods." Now they're doing it. That's
Nathan,
it.
Come on, man.
That's not what they voted on.
That's weak, bro.
That wasn't the problem.
How is listening to the voters in the?
No, you know what? If you want to listen to the voters, then put it in the ballot language. Put it in the. You know why they didn't do it, Nathan? Because the state wouldn't have passed it. Because the major concern about selling the railroad was exactly that. Everybody's going to come with their hand out. They're going to raid the pot. And the next thing you know, they're going to run through this $1.6 billion and there ain't going to be anything left. So the state intentionally, So what?
So finally, somebody decided to play politics to benefit poor people and underserved.
But see, Nathan, that's where you messing up. That's where you messing up, man.
I'm not messing up.
It ain't gonna benefit poor people in the end. These little crumbs that they gonna toss out. I'm telling, and that's what you don't seem to be getting. You arguing for
25 million is a lot,
you
bro.
Like, oh man, as long as they throw us some crumbs, it don't matter if they get the rest of the pie. We got our crumbs. Come on.
So now 25 million is crumbs.
Huh?
Stop.
Out of 1.6
billion is crumbs out of 1.6 billion.
They only getting 56 million a year. That's the annual return. So they're talking about
how many times do you think they're gonna spend that in them neighborhoods? You getting a one-time infusion of cash, just like this is why you can't trust people who switch up on you, because they switch up on you right now and tell you we're giving you 25 million this year, and then when next year roll around and the arena wants some money, guess what ain't gonna be there for them 15 rising neighborhoods? $25 million.
When it comes to putting money in the pockets of billionaires, we always hopeful.
Whatever, man. It's look, right is right and wrong is wrong.
There is no right and wrong in this. This is what they wanted to do.
Put it in the ballot language. Put it in the campaign. You know why they didn't?
Right and wrong.
If they had, it wouldn't have passed.
I can't agree with that, Nathan. I'm sorry. I can't agree with that. There is right and wrong in politics. There's 100% right and wrong in politics. Yes, it is.
You got
it absolutely
$50 million.
If you care, as a politician, if you care anything about the integrity and the integral relationship that you have with the people who have voted for you to put you in that position of power, you have to believe in right and wrong. You have to. You might not always maneuver in that in black and white definition of right and wrong, but you know better.
Well, no. I mean, no, not at all. But I hear what you're saying, though. I hear what you're saying, but no. This is about $50 million per year is coming in from railroad proceeds. How are you going to spend it? Eventually, somebody's going to come
Like you
along
told the
and cut up
taxpayers
that
you was
money.
gonna spend it.
What I'm
That's how
saying
you should
is
spend
there's been a greater wrong that's been done to these neighborhoods, potentially, if they can show it with the numbers, if they can, and they need to be made right. And $25 million
Well, then
can
don't
go a
lie to the
long way.
voters, bro. Don't lie to the voters. If you want to make it right, don't lie to the voters and let the voters decide. You look, let's just not talk about the railroad. Let's talk about something that you care about. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that if the city came forward and just said, let's flip it. Let's say if the city came forward and they said, hey, we're going to spend all this money in black neighborhoods to get black people to vote for it, because this has happened before in the past. We're going to do all of this stuff for black folks if you vote for it and pass, or if you vote for this person for mayor, they're going to do this for the black community. And then you vote for it and you don't get none of what you was promised. They switched up. Oh, you know what? Suddenly our pockets are dry, or suddenly I gotta do this for this community over here, and then I'll get to the black folks later. And what is the main thing that we say? You mad, your face is broke. You can't trust what these people say. So now, because it's working in your advantage, it's okay. That's the hypocrisy that drives me nuts, that I talk about on the podcast.
What are you talking about? What hypocrisy?
That's hypocrisy. So if politicians lie and it's in your favor, it's cool. But when it ain't in your favor, there's an issue.
I don't think anybody lied here.
Sure, they did. No new projects for this railroad.
Name the name of the person who lied. Then name the names.
Everybody who was a part of that committee that told
name the names, Kevin. Who lied?
We were going to use this money on deferred maintenance in addition to what we've got. Anybody who said that on council and is now turning around in council or part of that committee, the railroad commission, whoever sold that line of goods, put it in the ballot language.
Name the names and that's what they voted on. Name the names. If you can't name no names, then nobody lied, because nobody lied. Here is what happened. They came up with the railroad deal. People from the community pushed back on it and said, we're not voting on this because we don't know where the money is going. We want money to go to these neighborhoods. So now city council was saying, we're going to respond to what you said you wanted.
Nathan, what do you not get about? What do you not get about? What do you not get about transparency?
If you don't show up and vote, because this isn't going to happen for you, then all of a sudden, once it goes in one direction, then all of a sudden they're supposed to come back and say,
I call that equity. Well,
if you don't vote, then you don't get. I mean, so you get exactly what you vote for.
These
true.
These neighborhoods have been neglected for far too long. So
and who is and going back to my first point, who's neglected them?
The city.
All right. And so maybe somebody should sit down with the city budget and say, what the hell are we spending our money on? Or what the hell are they spending our money on? And how come we're not getting our piece of the pie? How come we are underserved?
That is fair.
That's right.
And I would say that
instead of raining one pot over here and taking money that wasn't intended for this from something, pull it from some other pot of where they've been wasting money all this time.
Yeah. And I would say this, Nathan, that if council wants to give, again, I've said this time and again, if council wants to spend $25 million on these neighborhoods, they can find $25 million from someplace else in their budget.
I thought they had a surplus.
They can find money someplace else in their budget.
What was the surplus they talked about a couple of weeks
ago? They've already divvied that up already, Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Well, why didn't they do it to the underserved communities then?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Nathan. Is the reason that you are okay with this because of the fact that you believe that there will never truly be specific, explicit, allocated funds to invest into these communities? And so you believe that the only way to get these communities served, the only way to get these communities to be able to benefit is to take from a different fund or a different pot of money that was allocated for something else. Is that because that's what I'm perceiving? You only believe that these neighborhoods will be justly funded or served if it is through this kind of backdoor way of taking money that was allocated for something else and diverting it to these neighborhoods. that there will never be in existence a way for our city to specifically and explicitly say to these people in these neighborhoods, we recognize that we have not allocated enough funds to these neighborhoods, and we are going to make a conscious effort, a specific and explicit effort to invest back into these communities. That will never happen.
Well, I can never say what will never happen, but that's kind of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
Okay.
that, this is a rare opportunity. This money is going to be taken by some other entity for some other reason eventually. So why not put these underserved neighborhoods at the front of the line right now and try to reinvest and invest in some levels in those neighborhoods, because the city only has so much money, right? And they just can't make money out of nothing. And so here's an opportunity to listen to some of the electorate. Again, a lot of people said they wanted this. Primarily Black people said they wanted this. So why not do it? And I do hear the argument, and it's not lost to me what you're saying about public trust, and this is not what they said in the bait and switch. I'm with you on that. I hear you. But so what? There's a greater good now, and the greater
That's not a
good
greater good.
is trying
See,
to invest in these
that's the
neighborhoods.
mistake that you made. You cannot, two wrongs do not make a right. And I don't care however you try to spin it, whatever try to lipstick or gloss you try to put on it. Bad is bad, and it never turns into a good. It always compounds and becomes more evil. And you can never ever
evil now.
Yeah.
Evil.
Well, I'm speaking in general. I'm speaking in general terms, but just more bad, for lack of a better term. I won't use evil. I'll just say it turns into more bad. And I always know that more bad winds up hurting the people who you think you're trying to help eventually down the line more than the people you think you're getting over on. And that has been history. That has been experience. And I don't know what it's going to take for people to, the better position would be to do kind of like what Kevin Gordon has said, which Black people have tried to do for years, but have not been listened to. Okay, as you're putting together the budget and you're looking at this big pot of money that you got there, where can you take $5 million from here, $5 million from there to come up with the $25 million or whatever that you need to spend and keep your word on what you told the taxpayers? But you know what? They're not going to do that because they want you to think that there's nowhere else in the city budget where there's waste, bloat, or glut that they can cut down on and find that money to serve these underserved neighborhoods. So they got to come get it from the railroad money because that's the hot thing right now. That's what everybody is talking about. So that's the thing that we can go with.
A few weeks ago, when they came up and said they had this surplus, wasn't it about $25 million?
I can't remember the amount.
I think it was somewhere around $20 million or something like that.
But that money is gone.
Well, but the point is that, you mean 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when this money fell out of the sky, that we didn't have underserved neighborhoods then? So where was the clamoring to spend $5 million here, take $5 million here? No, they wasted it on whatever the hell they wasted it on at that time. And the point is that because this pot of money is sitting over here, we're going to tap this, even though it was for one intended purpose, and that's what people voted on. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to ignore what that is and change the parameters, and we're going to move it over to someplace else. That's flat out not, and especially within 2 years of when it was first voted on, and this money is first available. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to come up here. No, that's
so. Here's how it's working. And again, I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying as I don't think these neighborhoods deserve more investment, that it's not a good idea to put new projects in there. This is all about integrity. Okay, this is all about integrity of the process.
Exactly.
So here's what council is doing. This $25 million that they're taking from the capital budget. Originally, that was $25 million that was going to probably be used to address some of these deferred maintenance problems. Absent the railroad money, this is money that they would have used to catch up on that type stuff. Okay. Now, because you can't use the railroad money was originally intended to help us catch up on that deferred maintenance. So the $25 million in the capital budget that they would have originally used for deferred maintenance, you add what you're getting from the railroad fund onto that, which allows you to catch up on the deferred maintenance more quickly. Now, what they're doing by taking the capital fund money that would have originally been used on deferred maintenance, and because they can't use the railroad money on new projects, they're just saying we're going to take 25 million and we're going to use that on new projects. So now the money that's coming in from the railroad fund is at best allowing you to tread water on what you had originally planned to do, not make any progress. Okay. And maybe if there's a little bit more come in, you make a little bit more progress, but not nearly as much as you would if all of that money was going toward the deferred maintenance, which again is what you sold taxpayers on.
They only want 10%.
And then who's to say,
Kevin.
And who's to say
10% of the annual return? That's it. They don't want all of it. They don't want half of it. They're asking for 10%.
Well, who's to say that of this money that's coming from the railroad funds, that if it's for infrastructure projects, that you don't earmark that or take that to these underserved communities and improve the infrastructure there, the existing infrastructure?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like that would be, but Kevin, what they're talking about is new projects. They want to use it for new things, which you can't use the railroad money for.
Right.
So that's why they're taking.
So we can't maintain, the city is saying we can't maintain what we have. So we want to add new stuff to it.
What in essence, here's what I want to know. What was the city's original, before this plan came up? What was the city's original intent with their capital budget money?
Kick it down the road?
Huh?
Kick the can down the road and deal with it.
So I'm guessing there probably wasn't a ton of new projects that they were using their capital fund budget money on. They were probably going to try to use that money to catch up on that $400 million worth of deferred maintenance. I don't know this. I'm going to find out though. But I would be curious to know how much of the original capital fund budget money that they had was catching up on deferred maintenance versus new projects.
Do they have a list of the deferred maintenance projects that have to be taken care of?
Man, what are you talking about, Kevin? I told you about the sob story tour that they went around and said the rats at the community center, whatever.
Well, wouldn't that rat facility be one of these underserved communities?
Academy Award to the mayor, because the mayor did a Oscar-worthy performance going around the city crying about these poor Black children at the community center and rats and just anywhere that needed deferred maintenance. That's where he was, and that was the sob story that he told.
Well,
so
then why not the deferred maintenance money?
I mean, was he lying about anything though? I mean, you said it was a sob story, but was he telling the truth?
This money is only for existing infrastructure, right? That's the money from the railroad fund, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why then can't they go to that community center that's overrun by rats?
They're still going to do that. They're still going to do that. All they're saying is we're going to take 10% and make sure that these neighborhoods get a little bit of money. That's all they're saying.
Forgive me. I need to jump off, but I will make one quick comment that if, as some of you were just saying, that this money will go toward those communities and perhaps as well as others. But if in fact these communities have been underserved, they will likely have more maintenance to do than the wealthier communities. So it should work out okay. Anyway, thank you. I got to jump off, but thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Phil. Appreciate it. Hey, you missed it, Kev. Phil got a whole new nickname. He's Sexy Phil now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. He's Sexy Phil. I meant to bring that up before he got off.
Sexy Phil though. Grizzled.
Based on
I can't remember. I just have that part stuck in my head.
We were having a conversation about how Bernice King responded to the AI meme that Sexy Red posted, and he called himself Sexy Phil.
And I won't let it go. So it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a win-win for the city. From I'm reading, Victoria Parks, Scotty Johnson, and John Michelle McKerney. I can't speak for Victoria Parks, but I know that Scotty Johnson was very vocal in saying that he was going to do everything he could to make sure that some of that railroad money was earmarked for these neighborhoods. So he's doing what he said he was going to do. And, I think it's a good deal for everybody. I think it's a win-win. We're going to have to get past what they said, get past all of that. These neighborhoods need some investment. Get
Remember
past
that.
it.
Remember Nathan said that because that's going to come up in a future
Hey,
discussion.
remember it. Take a picture, write it
On
down.
a different concept.
Send me an email.
When Kevin Gordon uses that on you, Nathan, on a point that you want to make, just get on past all of that.
I'm already over it. I'm already prepared for that.
I want you to suppress the Barbarian when Kevin hit you with it.
Oh, no. I'm already prepared for that. And my reason why is because the road that created these underserved neighborhoods was probably paved with a lot of lies, a lot of misrepresentation, a lot of bait and switch, dangling the carrot, and then you find out there's no carrot. All kinds of things that probably happened to make those neighborhoods what they are. And so if some people get their feelings hurt because they said it was supposed to go here, over there, okay, great. It's just a technicality. Do what you got to do to put the money where it needs to be spent. In this case,
my argument is I think there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to do it than lying to people. And again, I would just
who lied? You keep saying the L. Who lied? Who lied? Name the name.
Well, if you put
a lie,
before the voters a project of where you're going to spend this money, and that's what they vote on, and then you don't use that money for that, you've lied. So
now you can detect lies.
Right.
So now he can detect lies, but you can't detect no lies that Donald Trump tells.
So somebody explain to me, if you've got a list of deferred maintenance in these underserved communities, which is part of the existing infrastructure, and if this money here is for deferred maintenance on existing infrastructure, why isn't that then being used in those underserved communities to replace the infrastructure? Prioritize. If you've got the worst of the, if you got, okay, I don't know, if you got what, 400 million divided by 15, okay? If you take the worst of the 15 and you start there and you spend all the money from this particular year in that one neighborhood and bring that up, aren't you doing what they're asking you to do from bait and switch of this money?
Theoretically, yes. The answer to that question is yes. And I wouldn't even be sitting here saying what I'm saying if what they said was we're going to take this railroad money and we're going to use it to fix up the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure and things that are in place in these neighborhoods. There would be no argument there. The argument comes when they talk about doing something new, which violates the spirit. It doesn't directly violate the law because they're technically not using the railroad money for the new projects. But what they are doing is they're diverting money that probably most likely would have been used for deferred maintenance anyway. Now they're taking that money and they're using it for new.
Well, the question needs to be then, if you're building a house or you have an existing house and your foundation is crumbling, do you then take the money and put an addition on the house over that foundation that's going to wind up crumbling anyway? Shouldn't you fix the foundation first before you add new projects?
Well, and they might very well. I mean, that 25 million might, to Nathan's point, might fix roads and infrastructure. I don't know how they're going to spend the money.
Because if you don't fix the basic infrastructure, as you just mentioned, roads and stuff, then people are not going to go to those neighborhoods anyway because they're, the infrastructure isn't there to support going to those neighborhoods in the first place.
I think you do both, and that's what they're trying to do with the spirit of this. And again, this is just my thoughts. I haven't got a chance to speak with them, but you do both. You take some of the money and you build up the infrastructure, and you take some of the money, the 10%, and you put that into new investments. You do both.
You do the new investment from someplace else, not the existing fund.
And as Kevin said, they're not breaking any laws. So yeah, maybe the spirit.
They're breaking the spirit. They're violating the spirit of the law.
But what about the spirit of the people that live in those neighborhoods, Kevin? What about the spirit of the families that live in those neighborhoods over the last decades and decades? What about their spirits? It's time to invest the money where it has not been invested.
I'm with you on what you're saying, and my whole thing is if that's what you wanted to do, you should have been up front. You should have been up front.
They were up front.
No, they were not, because the ballot language that people voted on. No, you can't say no. This is facts.
Scotty Johnson
language that people voted on said nothing about we're going to swap capital fund money with the railroad money so that we can take capital fund money and spend it on new projects.
But Scotty Johnson,
had they said that, I'm telling you, one, it would not have passed. They wouldn't have got approval from the state, because this is what everybody who was against it feared. And that's the point.
Yeah, but
that even the same black people now who are just like, hey, give me some of the money. They were against that notion because they felt like that the money was going to go to the arena folks and all of that, and black people wasn't going to get none. So now all of a sudden that black people going to get some, now it's all right. Yeah, that's the hypocrisy. So when the arena was going to get it, this was a bad idea to do the money swap. But now that black neighborhoods is going to get it, oh, it's kind of okay.
Yeah, but can I point out the difference though? The people behind the arena are usually multimillionaires, if not 100 millionaires and billionaires. They don't really need it. The people over there, they need it.
Nathan, I'm not arguing that. You and I are arguing two different things here. I'm not saying those people over there don't need that they shouldn't get it, that historically they haven't been done wrong or disinvested. What I'm saying is if you wanted to do that, put that in the ballot language so that the state don't misrepresent what you're going to do to the state. Don't misrepresent what you're going to do to the voters at the ballot box. When you do that, I can't get with you because you know what? You lied.
And all I'm saying is Scotty Johnson voted against it, right? He voted against it because he felt like he didn't trust what they was going to do with the money.
Okay, so you're making my point. You're making my point. You're making my point.
I might be. I don't know. Let me finish though. So Scotty Johnson voted against it because he felt like there wasn't any money.
Hey, Kevin, why don't you and I go have a beer and he can start arguing with himself on this? Okay.
I'm starting to think you get some of this rise in 15 money, Nathan.
Oh no,
that's gonna be the next thing.
Can I just make?
Let me finish this point real quick, and I'll give you the floor. So Scotty Johnson voted against it because he was concerned and he was very vocal about it. His biggest issue is he felt like the money wasn't going to go to the black community. He felt like these type of neighborhoods, the Rising 15, were not going to get any of it. So he voted against it. Well, it passed. Now he's saying that I want to make sure that some of that money goes to exactly where I wanted it to go. So he has not lied.
I'm not talking about Scotty Johnson. Scotty Johnson may be one of the few people in this process with some integrity because Scotty has been consistent throughout. Scotty's been consistent about his support for the black community from his time on council. Like Scotty stands on business and he typically votes along the lines of what he says. But to my point, Scotty voted against it because the ballot language didn't say that. If the ballot language had did what you say Scotty Johnson said it was going to do, he would have voted for it. But he didn't. But he didn't vote for it because that's not what they told the people they were going to use the money for.
Right.
Okay, so now you're making my point. They lied.
No.
Scotty Johnson didn't lie. Johnson didn't lie, but the people who pushed the campaign lied.
I'm not sure if that's accurate. I mean, who lied?
Nathan. Okay, let me just break this down just in simple terms here. So if the ballot language, if the proposal to sell the railroad has said, hey, black neighborhoods or underserved neighborhoods are going to be first off the block to get this money, do you think Scotty Johnson would have voted yes?
Yes, he would have voted yes.
Okay, he did not vote. He did not vote yes. And so therefore that tells you that that's not what it said. So if that's not what it said,
we already know that. So what's your point?
Okay, so my point is that that's what people voted on. People voted on what it said. And Scotty Johnson voted no because no money was going to black neighborhoods for the railroad. That's why he voted no. Okay. So that is what makes it a lie. Not Scotty Johnson's lie, but certainly the mayor's lie and everybody else who backed the campaign.
Nah, the mayor himself, the mayor backed this. He was in support of this. But I remember him going on Lincoln Show saying, we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that some of this money goes to some of these neighborhoods as much as we can.
Okay, some of the money is going to some of these neighborhoods. And when he said that, most people would probably assume for existing infrastructure. You're going to fix roads, bridges, things that already exist in these neighborhoods. He didn't say, and the mayor is a very skilled politician, man. These dudes know how to be ambiguous or say whatever. But if Lincoln or anybody who was interviewing him had pressed him and said, are you going to spend this on new things in those neighborhoods? He would have said no. You know why he would have said that? Because that is what they were telling voters. That's what they had to say to get it passed, to get the state to allow them to do it. And it's what they had to say to get voters to approve it. Because everybody, not just black voters, but white voters who hate the stadium, who hate the stadiums and the amount of tax money to spend on the stadium, the same way you hate what the Bengals is getting from taxpayers, there are a whole lot of people in the city who don't want to see that same kind of money go to other sports venues. And that was the main concern. If you open this up, that's when those folks are going to come from the money. And now you're opening it up because you're saying it's okay to give it to these 15 neighborhoods. So when the Raiders come, and they will come.
They were coming anyway, bro.
Okay.
They was coming anyway.
Okay.
They're coming anyway.
Well,
Let's
But
deal with
I think the point that
coming
Kevin is
anyway.
trying to make is that when they do come, we will have no moral standing or no moral ground to
Exactly.
stand, no
We won't need a
moral high
moral
ground
Don't
to
say
stand
nothing.
on.
That's all I'm saying. If you in those 15 neighborhoods or you a black person and anybody in Cincinnati, including Nathan Ivey, when they come for that money for the arena, bro, don't say nothing. Just sit there. Don't even do the segment. Don't even do the segment on the podcast.
Having the high moral ground ain't gonna stop what they're gonna do anyway. It wouldn't have mattered. It won't make a difference.
I'll say, but let me say this though. It might not make a difference in that way with what we currently are dealing with. But this is something that I think about often. Not that I have any political aspirations, because truth be told, I understand that as a politician, you can't just say whatever you want to say and truly move in how you feel. You have to be considerate of what everybody, of what all of your constituents may want or feel, and sometimes those things conflict with one another. That being said, when I look at situations like this as a voter, I think about the kind of politicians that I want to see in the future. I don't just think about the ones we already have. I think about the ones that I want to see rise through the ranks and to truly represent me in the neighborhood that I live in. When it comes to that, when it comes to something like this, what I have to think about is, if I am in agreement with something like this, will I also in the future be expectant of a politician? Because we say this all the time. What is is there even a such thing as an honest politician? Well, there never will be if we never expect for the things that we vote for to be exactly what we get. How do you expect to ever have an honest politician, either now or in the future, if we continue as voters to allow things to happen that undermine our vote? You cannot say in one breath that you want to have the kind of politicians and the kind of representation that will be 100% honest and upfront about their intentions with your votes, and then also be in support of a politician doing something underhanded or that undermines what you voted for, what was in the verbiage of the issue that you voted yes or no for. If they are not sticking to that, how can you ever, as a voter, with the same mouth, with the same breath, say, I want to be able to vote for the kind of politician who will say what they mean what they say, and represent me in an honest way? How can you say that?
And this is where those of us in the media who do this, where we have to always be sharp and make sure that we're doing this and asking these politicians the direct question. Because I guarantee you, and we may have done this at the Inquirer, I may have to go back and look, all this stuff starts to run together after a while. But I guarantee you, if you had gone down and you had polled everybody who was on council at that time, and you had asked them directly, if you had said to them, hey, if when we get this railroad money, would you be in favor of swapping out money from the capital fund to do new projects, regardless of where they are in the city, and replacing that money with money that comes out of the railroad, however much amount, would you be in favor of that? Perhaps with the exception of Scotty Johnson, who, again, I give him credit because, and again, I'm not saying Scotty Johnson was among the dishonest among this, right? At least Scotty had the integrity to say, absolutely. If this money come in, I'm going to try to do whatever I can to get this to black neighborhoods. But had you polled the mayor and everybody else on city council, I don't know this, I'm speculating, but I doubt a majority of them would have been as honest as Scotty Johnson and put their cards on the table. They would have found some way to equivocate like the mayor did to make it seem like you're on their side. Oh yeah, we're going to spend some of this money in neighborhoods on new projects. On new projects, Mr. Mayor? Oh, yeah. See, I don't know that he got asked that question. And part of that is on my fault. And I have to go back and look and see how when we editorialized on this, what we actually asked the mayor. Did we ask him that specific question? Because you got to do that with these politicians, because they'll always leave you with statements that make it seem like they on your side, but they don't paint themselves into a corner. And you got to force them to answer questions directly, right? And so I guarantee you, this is just my gut thing. If you had gone down and polled them and written a story that said 6 out of the 9 count, or what is 9 people on council? 6 out of the 9 said that they would be in favor of a money swap with railroad money, including the mayor, right? If that story comes out, it don't pass. It don't pass. It don't pass. Because people gonna be like, can't trust them. That's exactly what we talk about. They can't wait to get at that railroad money and spend it on everything except for what they told us for. And so this is the type of integrity and dishonesty that I'm talking about here. Now, who knows what council members would say? We'll see on how they vote on this proposal, right? From Jan Michelle to Victoria. Victoria Park's on her way out the door anyway, so it don't really matter how she votes. She ain't running no more, so she can do whatever she wants. We know what Scotty gonna do. So Jan Michelle brought it forward, so I can assume that she's gonna vote for it. So now we'll see what the rest of the council members do, and see whether this actually has a chance of becoming something. But we'll see, because I bet you there's some corners of the business community who's sitting back, probably tell you, hey, yeah, they're gonna be quiet. They're gonna be quiet. They're not gonna say nothing. You know why they're gonna be quiet? Because they hoping council pass it. Because as soon as they do, there gonna be some meetings, if not already going on. They're gonna immediately start going on.
They were gonna do that anyway, Kevin, and you know that. You know that. They're gonna do that anyway.
Yeah, but you know what though? You stand on a lot more it's a lot harder for those council members.
I mean, Nate has already said that he don't give a damn about more high ground. So making that argument with Nate is a lost cause.
Yeah, I mean, because it's immoral what happened to these neighborhoods. So I mean, it all balances out. And my biggest issue is, I hear you. Bro.
Why did it allow?
You and Raven
to happen in the first place?
You and Raven, Kevin, Phil, you are all correct. I hear you. But I guess the reason I just keep coming back to is, I know that they're coming for the money anyway. And so maybe they're using this as a Trojan horse. Okay. Well, let's make sure these neighborhoods get what they need first before the big money interest coming in for a new arena or whatever. We can't even imagine what it is.
They'll figure out some way of getting their piece of the pie.
They're going to get their piece of the pie anyway, is what I'm keep saying.
So, yeah.
So let's get ours, loose definition. Let's get the rising 15 where they probably need more than that. Actually, should be like 20-25%. Really, we always underplaying a community, underserved communities. It should be 20-25%. But let's give them their 10% now, before the big money boys come in here and take the rest of it, because they come in whether they have an excuse or they don't have an excuse.
From where the city is wasting money currently, and eliminate the underserved communities. Make sure you fix that before you start inventing new ways of spending other money.
Exactly. So Nathan, what do you say? What do you say to all of the other communities? And this is where I say 2 wrongs don't make a right. What do you say to all of the other communities? Some of them, which will also be Black communities that are not in the rising 15, who have needs that would have been taken care of, existing infrastructure needs that would have been taken care of. So I got to be okay now, because they want to do something new, something different than what they told me when I voted on it. Now I got to wait because they want to do something new. There's a general unfairness that exists to the entire city by the way that they're doing this. And again, it's not about the intention. It's not about the good that it would do for these communities. And I'm all about correcting historical injustices. But I'm also big about, you cannot become the thing that you hate. And that is what this is.
I don't even think that fits this situation, bro.
It does. Absolutely.
And
It
two
does.
wrongs do make a right.
okay,
It depends on what the wrong is.
what
If you
is
smack me across my
on the
mouth,
plate?
I'm smacking you right back, and now everything is all right.
So let me ask you this. So
two wrongs do make a right sometimes.
I'm not going to name any names, and I'm not going to do anything, but you're sort of from the philosophy of, well, everybody else was doing it, so it's okay for us to do it.
No, let me tell you my philosophy is, and you kind of used the word just earlier. You just said that you kind of think it's unfair for all the other neighborhoods. But what I'm thinking about is all the unfairness that made those underserved neighborhoods, right? What's been done to them has been unfair for decades.
But correcting unfair, there are right ways and wrong ways to correct unfairness, and the way that you do it matters if you want to maintain a moral high ground or a moral
man.
It's not that just getting it done by any means necessary is not the way that we should be thinking.
They're not breaking any laws, Kevin.
Okay.
It's not a matter of law though. It's a matter of moral, which you have rejected, moral. Nate. We understand this. You rejected it. But again, as explained before, there are some of us who do value a moral ethic code in the people Nathan that we vote for.
Nathan does too, Raven, but it's situational. Yeah. Because I can go back a few podcasts where Nathan, where we were just talking about immigration, the last podcast, and Nathan wanted to die on the moral hill of not following the law versus having a bleeding heart for immigrants and allowing them to say it was a moral issue and people were morally justified in not following the law.
And if I lived during the time of enslaved people, I would have been one of those.
No, we ain't even talking
one
about
of those people on the Underground Railroad.
We talk about immigration.
Defying the law.
You said that you thought that enforcing the immigration laws was a moral injustice, that people had the right not to follow the law.
For me personally, yes, that's what I said.
In this particular situation, in this particular
situational, yeah, like everybody else. I look at the situation and decide what I think is moral for me. Yeah, just like you do.
Well, in this particular situation, if we are staying within this window of conversation, we understand that Nate don't give a damn about the moral high ground. But again, when it for me personally, when it comes to how I look at this, I don't have a choice but to, because that's what currently has the most effect on how I vote. I vote for the person who I think has the most honest platform. That's the way that I have always doled out how I vote. The person who has the most honest platform is the person who typically gets my vote, because that's the person who I trust most to do what is morally correct. And if I find that somebody who takes a stand against racism, who takes a stand against classism, who takes a stand against misogyny and all these things, if I find those things to be moral, then I have to be universal about how I go about that, including how I decide that I'm going to show support or not to the things that person is doing while they are occupying that seat. And so I have all love for Jan Michelle. I just saw her last weekend at the Bill K Gala. I love Jan Michelle. I love her heart and her intention behind proposing this. I really do. But I hope and I pray that when she truly looks at this and the gamble that she's taking with the integrity of the situation, I pray that she finds a different way to do this, because I don't think that when push comes to shove, I don't think that it comes across in the most morally ethical way. I do believe that for somebody who votes the way that I vote, which is typically rooted in my moral compass, my own personal moral compass, it's not going to fare well. It's going to make me hesitant about how I vote in the future. That's just how I feel. That's just how I feel. And also too, I just want to remake this point. I don't just be thinking about current politics. I think about the future of politics and what I hear people around me say all the time about what they want to see in the future of politics. If we want the kind of politician who will not be afraid to tell us exactly what they mean when they say it and stand on their business when they get in that position of power, we cannot make allowances for these kinds of things. They have to be outright in their and the way that they handle the issues that are placed in their lap by the community. Be outright at all times. Be outright. Be legal, but also be outright and moral about the decisions that you're making when I vote. When I cast my vote on your moral standings, I have, because of the way that I vote, I have to hold you accountable for the things in terms of morality that you do in that seat. That's just for people who vote like I do.
Well, let me
We
ask
gotta get
something
Jim to
here
show me
real
here.
quick. Let me ask something here real quick. Okay. We have a list of items that are part of the deferred maintenance that need to be taken care of. We know that list, right? What we're talking, or what is being discussed, is taking some of this money that was earmarked for that to do some new stuff in these underserved neighborhoods. What are those new, what is that new stuff? And my question on that new stuff would be, is that if that new stuff is really good, and if it's really beneficial, and if it's going to help that underserved neighborhood, somebody is going to find the funding for that. Instead of taking money from somewhere else, they'll come up with either new money or invest from other places. So this whole conversation,
so that's the challenge, though, Kevin, and this was the point that I was trying to make with Phil earlier, is that won't happen. Even if the idea is somewhat worthwhile, like, part of the argument for using this money is that there's been disinvestment or a lack of investment in these neighborhoods from developers or whomever, because they don't see any profit in it, right? They don't see any benefit from investing in these neighborhoods for whatever reason. And the city hasn't as well. You know, Phil kind of talked about, when we talk about downtown, like, the city spends so much money down there because they see a benefit coming back that they feel like merits spending that kind of money downtown, versus they're not going to spend that kind of money in Price Hill or in some of these other neighborhoods because they don't see the return of investment there. And most of the time, developers and other businesses don't, until the property values and things get so low that they can then swoop in and then kind of gentrify. And these are the conversations that we have about transforming communities in ways that the people who live there are either moved out, they can't afford to live there, all of these things. What I think the council members are trying to do with this is they're trying to step in and circumvent that, right, with some of this railroad money, and put some investment there that might actually that might be for the people who are there and who might actually allow them to live there. That's not my
then issue. If they truly believe that, Kevin, then they should pull money from whatever pet project they're supporting and put that there, instead of the money that they told the taxpayers, we're going to use this for that. And then come up with, out of their budget,
isn't that what they're doing?
They should move that money to this new project.
I agree.
So
isn't that essentially what they're doing, though, guys?
It's this whole thing of other people's money. It's like, well, if I can continue to promote this project that is not, or whatever they're funding as far as the city is concerned, that is not really providing any benefit for anybody, but it's just there in the budget, and we're just going to leave it. We don't have the guts to cut that out and move it to someplace else. We're just going to let this money keep being spent over here, instead of stepping up to the plate and saying, this is wrong, let's use it here.
Yeah, and Nathan, to your point, you're saying, well, isn't that what they're doing here?
No,
they're not moving money from someplace else. What they are doing is they're taking money that was originally going to be earmarked for this very type of thing, right? And again, that's why I say the intent of what they sold people on the railroad was, hey, we've already got money in our capital budget, right? We've got money in our capital budget, but it's not enough for us to catch up on all of the deferred maintenance that we've got. It takes us 100 years with what we allocate to the capital budget every year to catch it up. And the mayor, this is a 100-year plan right here. This is gonna change the city, right?
Yeah,
all of this stuff that he said. Okay, so now what you're doing is people are thinking, okay, well, this railroad money, this interest that they're getting that we'll be able to spend will allow us to quicken that up. So the money that we got in the capital budget that's going toward this deferred maintenance already, because I don't know.
That's still going to happen. That's still happening.
But Nathan, you got to understand. So if I tell you, hey man, you got $100 right now to put on your rent, but I'm going to give you an additional $100 to put on your rent so that you can hurry up or on your mortgage so you can hurry up and pay it down faster. But you say, okay, I'm going to take $50 of that $100 you giving me to pay down my mortgage faster, and I'm going to go buy some Jordans, or I'm going to put that on some Jordans instead of putting it on my mortgage.
Bad analogy.
No, it's not a bad analogy.
I would not equate Jordans to helping out underserved.
No, Nathan, this is just a practical. I'm not equating it. This is just a practical application. So if I'm giving you $100 to pay down your mortgage quicker, and you take a percentage of that and use it to do something else other than paying your mortgage down quicker, I'm gonna be mad because that ain't what I gave you the $100 for. I gave you the $100 to pay your mortgage down quicker, not to go out and get something new that ain't got nothing to do with your mortgage.
I feel you on the analogy. I don't think it's quite consistent, but I understand what you're saying.
It's the same concept.
I mean,
it's not the same concept.
If we can switch,
explain to me.
I think it's a little different only because I think I kind of have to agree with Nate now because I kind of agree that was kind of a bad. It was kind of a bad application. It was kind of a bad. It was kind of a bad
analogy.
I won't say comparison, but it was kind of a bad comparison.
Let's just say
because only one person.
Let's say
only one person.
Charity.
And the analogy you just used, only one person is receiving and having access to that $100 that you're giving them. This is a communal pot of money that multiple people are having to agree on what it gets spent on, and so it's a bit different because from one person to another, and this is just my personal philosophy. If you ask me for $100 and I decide, no matter what reason you ask it for, if it's to pay your mortgage, if it's to whatever you ask it for, once I release that $100 to you, once I release that $100 to you, you do whatever you need to do with it.
You do whatever you. You're changing the parameters of the discussion.
You changed the parameters.
You changed it though.
Let me explain, because Raven was saying if I give you $100 to do
whatever you do with it is your business. It's not gonna hurt me that your mortgage don't get paid.
Apply in this situation because voters did not approve that railroad money, saying to the city that you take it and do whatever you want to do with it. Those weren't the parameters of what voters agreed to when they
which is why, but that applies because you're not giving that money to just one person. You're giving it to a community of people.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It does though. It does matter though.
So to follow your logic, then Raven. Okay, you're not giving it to one person, but instead of 52 neighborhoods, you're giving it to 15. So that's no different. So you're deciding, you're saying, hey, I'm going to give this money, not to everybody, but I'm giving it to 15 specific people. So how is that any different than giving it to one person? It's the same thing. You're saying taking a communal pot of money and giving it to like one person. Well, what about 15? What about taking a communal pot and giving?
Well, it's still not one person though. It's the point. It's still not within that 15. It still ain't one person, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. You can say.
It's about giving money.
It's just different. If my sister come to me and ask me for $100, no matter what she asking for, she come to me and she asks me for $100. If I decide to give her that $100, whatever she end up spending it on, that ain't got nothing to do with me. I've already done my part in this deal.
Let me ask you this.
Versus having to be responsible to an entire community of people, that is completely different. If she say to me, well, me and my girlfriends are starting this investment group and we're asking you, Raven, for an investment of $1,000 and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that and we're gonna do that, then maybe I can feel some type of way because the reason why I'm giving you $1,000 is because you told me that you and your friends are gonna get together and invest and take this money and invest it in something or do something with it that is going to be more, it'll make more money or it'll become more of a benefit to a collective of people rather than my sister just asked me for $100. That's completely different.
No, y'all missing the point of what I'm trying. Y'all getting caught up with the numbers versus the principle. If your sister came to you and said, Raven, I need $100 for my rent.
The principle is just a bad analogy, bro. We get the principle.
It's not a bad analogy. It's a bad analogy because you don't want to accept it because you got caught up because I used Jordans. Okay.
No, it wasn't even the Jordans. It's just the whole structure of the principle
applies. I'm trying to make it more personal so that y'all can get it.
But that's where you're wrong.
If somebody comes and asks you, Nathan,
why can't we just agree?
This is public money. That's where you're wrong.
Why can't we just agree?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You trying to flip the script. The bottom line is if I come to you and I say, Nathan, I need you to give me $100 so that I can pay my rent. You say, cool, Kev, I'm gonna give you $100. You're trusting, right? That maybe that $100 might be the last $100 you got, but you being generous. And you're saying, hey man, I'm giving this to you, trusting that you're gonna take that $100 that you just asked me for and use it for the purpose that you said. Now let's just say if I go off, let's just say I give it away to charity, whatever, for lack of a better term, since y'all got a problem with the Jordans. Let's just say I gave it to charity. And then I turn around and I came back to you and I said, Nathan, man, they about to put me out of my house. And you're going to be like, well, man, what happened to that $100 I gave you? I thought you said you was going to use that to pay the rent. Nah, man, I gave that away. Hey, man, you think you could give me another $100 so I could pay my rent? What would you say?
I'm just resisting the whole framework of.
I know you are, Nate, because you know why you resisting it. Because it makes
I don't
sense.
mind giving you credit at all.
It makes sense.
Can we just agree on the fact that we have the voters that said this money was supposed to be spent for this item and not for this over here?
Yes.
And if you are not going to do that, then you're setting the precedent so that no matter what comes down the pike, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Yes. We can just change on a dime and we don't have to listen to the voters. That's probably why we have underserved neighborhoods, because the city council members came through and said, I'm all for the people. I'm for this. I want this city to be better. I want this to happen. I want this to happen. They get in office and then ignore these underserved communities and they become worse. So in other words, what you're asking is for somebody to come along and fix a problem that you created in the first place, that now all of a sudden you're the person that's going to solve the problem that you created.
You just made my point. Exactly. You're right. So the city of Cincinnati created all of these underserved neighborhoods in the first place. So now when a pot of money is coming in, it's right to say, hey, let's take care of what we didn't take care of all this time.
No.
Thank you,
Let's
Kevin.
go back to what the money that's coming in that is supposed to be used on this deferred maintenance and spend it on the neighborhoods that we're supposed to spend it on from the budget that we have, and stop this other stuff that we've invented over here that we're wasting money on.
It's only 10%. It's not that big a deal.
I don't care if it's 10%. I don't care if it's 1%.
So it's not that big a deal. And what is it? What is it going to matter? What is it going to matter to those neighborhoods? It is a big deal. It's just like
it's not a big deal.
It's just like what you accuse me of with the end zone. You're trying to minimize it, bro. You are trying to minimize it.
It's absolutely a big deal because I think the money should be earmarked.
So it's not that big a deal. It's only it is a big deal to take care of them. And it ain't that big a deal. You minimize it, man. You minimize it.
It is not a big deal at all. That 10%, the taxpayers ain't even gonna notice it. But to an underserved neighborhood, $25 million a year. If that's
I bet you taxpayers notice it more than they notice.
So is it $25 million each, or is it $25 million across all 15?
I think that's a good question. I want to say that it's 25 across all 15.
So what's 25 million divided by 15?
I don't know.
It won't be that much.
It'll be more than what they have.
It won't be 25 million. I'd be surprised if it'd be 25 million across all 15 neighborhoods. Because first of all, they ain't got that much money coming in from the railroad fund that they can use to replace.
That's
$1.7 million a year, I think, is the estimate from the railroad fund. That's what the estimate is in the article.
Yeah, but I think there's a limit. No matter how much comes in, I think there's a limit to how much the city can take.
It's 53 million or so. I think that's what the amount of money we're talking about that they're going to be able to do something with.
So roughly if all 15 neighborhoods, if my math is correct, because it's only 25 million divided by 15, but roughly about 1.7 million would go to each neighborhood. My question is 1.7 million. What does that look like?
I'll take it.
What is I'm just my this is I just got what does that look like in terms
Nothing.
of new projects in 15 different communities in the city? What does that
Nothing.
look like?
I think it can be significant. Like if you're talking about a Price Hill, a Roll Hill, some of these neighborhoods, I think it can be significant. But I think that is a very fair question that needs to be answered by city council if they're going to move forward. I think that's a very fair
Well, I
question.
think before they move forward, if they vote and say that, okay, we're going to divert this money or swap this money out, they better damn sure have a good project or a good idea in
I
mind
agree
of what
with
they're
you.
going to spend that on.
I agree
And
with
maybe
that.
that's when people need to be at city council. But if you want to use an analogy, I was just thinking of this. If you've got a house and you've got a small leak to where you're putting a pot under that and you're catching the water, and you get this pot of money that you're supposed to use for infrastructure and to repair the current infrastructure, and you say, well, you know what, that spot really isn't all that bad. I'm going to go over and I'm going to start adding a room over here, or I'm going to go paint this room over here and add some new furniture over here, and then your ceiling collapses. Then you've diverted this money to the wrong area, and of course the people should be outraged by that. And what I'm saying is that if you've got a list of projects that are the current items that have been deferred maintenance that need to be brought up to standard, fix those first before you invent other ways to spend this money.
I hear you. Again, I hear what y'all saying. I am not telling you that you're wrong. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I hear.
So agree with us and
saying.
move on to the next project.
Yeah, he just don't care. That's the underlying reason. The Barbarian hears us. He acknowledges the truth. It just don't matter.
No, I acknowledge what you're saying, and I think that
he just wants to get his paddle out and just stir that pot more is what he wants to do.
Yeah, partly. You brought up some great points. I mean, Phil brought up a great point. Like, what does underserved mean? That's a great question. That needs to be defined with data to back up this move before I would feel comfortable actually doing it. You need to justify it with numbers, empirical data. And then what are the projects? People brought that, all fair questions. So I'm not going to hold you guys. We've been even longer than I anticipated. So I'll just end the show as we normally do and say,
well, let me ask you a question before we get out of here.
Yeah. Anything you want to bring up that needs to be said, speak now or forever hold your
one
peace.
of the things that has been going on, you remember back in 2013 where, we've been talking, how long have we been talking about the Brent Spence Bridge and the companion bridge down there? Back in 2013, this was a project that had to be done right here, right now. We can't wait another minute. But then they came back and said, well, we're going to do this project, but it's going to result in tolls. A group of us said, no, we're not. Tolls or taxes. This is stupid and so on. Then we get this infrastructure bill that says that, all right, we've got the money earmarked for the bridge down there, and it's not going to require tolls. And this was such a big project that had to be done right here, right now. We're now 12 years away. We've had this infrastructure bill that's been there for almost 3 years, and there still hasn't been a groundbreaking ceremony down there. When the hell, and when is the Inquirer going to, or maybe the Inquirer should hold their feet to the fire and say, was this a lie that you told us back there in 2013? Or is this really a significant project that needs to be done?
Yeah. I think what you're asking is you want an update on sort of where things stand with the bridge project. And that's,
well, we got groups over there saying, well, it's going to be, we got endangered species, or it's going to pollute the water. It's going to do this, all this sort of stuff. Whether it, was it the Chamber of Commerce and them saying that this is the most important priority for the area 12 years ago? Were they lying to us?
Well, who pays for the bill? Isn't this federal money?
It is now, but originally they were talking about tolling the bridge down there.
Right.
Yeah, and they couldn't agree on that. There wasn't broad support for tolls, which is it was primarily a funding thing.
So if this money is available, why not use it?
I'm not sure what the holdup is with moving things forward. It's kind of like what you said. Some of it could be legal. On projects like this, there are always going to be environmental groups and different.
Hell, it was. I remember. I mean, Barack Obama, when they started talking about the shovel-ready projects. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He held a press conference down there. I think it was 2011, with the backdrop of the Brent Spence Bridge, and talking about, hey, here's a shovel-ready project right here. We can go ahead and use some of this money on that. Well, that didn't happen. Then it was
behind that.
What's that?
I said, I wonder if the Republican Party on the national level was behind that on some levels. They put up a big resistance to anything that Obama came up with. Anytime a Democrat came up with an infrastructure project, they labeled it as socialism and communism. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with delaying it.
Well, the bottom line with the delay is the delay was always based in, up to this point, has always been based in money. I mean, it was a financial issue. There was no money.
It boils down to the city of Cincinnati can't get their act together in order to approve wherever this is going to. We could go back to, you remember Jim Bunning, when he was a congressman before he even became a senator. He had, when they did earmarks back then, there was money earmarked for the replacement bridge for the additional bridge down there. And that money kept getting kicked around to the point where it was going to expire. Now you can go down to Maysville and see that beautiful new bridge that they have down there from 15, 20 years ago, because that's where that money went, because it was going to be lost. Then all of a sudden you get the infrastructure bill from Obama. Then you get the public-private partnership, in other words, raping the American public for tolls, which should have been done by the federal government to begin with. And so then that got held up. Now we have an infrastructure bill again where this money is available. And the city of Cincinnati still is dragging their feet, trying to determine where they're going to put the off ramps, exit ramps. They're going to design this section over here for 27 more acres where we can develop land. And it's just delay. Either this is an important project or it's not.
No, I think you raise an interesting point. Like, what, is it political incompetence locally that is slowing things down or not getting it done? Is it, things that are tied up in the legal network? I don't think any of us on here have the answers to the questions. I think, you raised an interesting point. Like, this is something good probably for those of us in the local press to find out and try to answer some of those questions to where you are and that you raise in terms of, hey, where are things at? Why are things moving so slow? And what I hear you saying is are we going to blow an opportunity to get this thing done and, let money expire or whatever, circumstances change before we're able to get this new bridge project done? I think that's a reasonable question.
And the answer to the question that somebody just popped up, no, Kasich did not refuse all infrastructure money. In fact, there was a joint agreement between Steve Beshear and John Kasich that they were going to share the project down there, the money. It's one of those things of where we were told by our Chamber of Commerce, we were told by these so-called experts that this was one of the most important projects of our lifetime. And here it is 12 years later, and it's still being kicked around, and they still can't decide what they're going to do.
But I seem to remember that. I thought that Kasich did turn down some Obama money.
He may have turned it down for some other project, but
you know how it is. You know how your party does. Like anything a Democrat does, even
not if they're going to get money, they don't turn down free money.
I have to say, I think on this one, this is a win-win for Republicans and Democrats.
No, it was high-speed rail money. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was that, right?
Okay. I knew it was something, Kevin. I knew it was something.
Yeah, Kasich was never sold on that. Kasich was never sold on the whole rail. I think it was a 3R or 3C.
Because it was a good idea that a Democrat
corridor, Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati or something like that.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
It's like the high-speed rail in California. That's gone really well over there too. Yeah.
Anything else? Anything that needs to be said? Or
I was just going to bring this up because I don't know how true this is or isn't, but I saw several people in the comments that were talking earlier about some kind of, I think it was like, what are they saying? Some kind of Nazi protest or something out on I-75 by Evendale or Glendale, something like that. I was looking on Cincinnati.com real quick for that, and I didn't see any anything that we had up on it. I haven't had a chance to check any of the other news websites to know whether that in fact.
Nazis love Kevin's president. They love Trump.
Was
Wonder
true
why.
But that could be something that, depending on the breadth of it or seriousness of it, that might be something we might have to revisit next week.
Now, Kevin G, I know that Trump is not a racist, but it's just funny how all the racists and bigots and Nazis, they just love him some Trump. I wonder why.
Well, wait a minute. The Nazis and the bigots and the racists.
Well, Elon is a Nazi because he did the Heil Hitler, so we know that. The bigots, the KKK endorsed.
Dear God, are you serious? Are you actually going to go there?
Yeah, the Nazis and the bigots and the racists love Trump. The Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, they love
the
Trump.
Racists, Hillary, Biden, and Bill are racist.
I never seen them do the Hitler sign. I never saw them do the Hitler sign like I seen Elon do it.
Hang on a second here.
I've never seen them do
Glad you brought that up.
Kevin, don't do what we've seen all over the internet. You just did what we've seen all over the internet. That is midway, and you know it.
And Kevin was ready for that. That's what I love. And you're ready for that.
And you're going to tell me
but he's ill prepared. He's ill prepared because every single one of those were screen grabs from videos of them waving,
taking the heart and saying to all you people that you're going to freeze that time in time and take that as a Nazi salute.
That's what it was.
The people in Germany took it as a Nazi salute.
What?
I said the people in Germany took it as a Nazi salute. They've been protesting him ever since.
Well, the people in Germany are
the experts on Nazis
right to begin with because they have done away with all their coal plants, and now they're getting their natural gas from Russia, and funding the war effort against Ukraine. So how brilliant are they?
Hey, Kevin, let me ask you this, though, in all seriousness. Let's put the Nazi salute thing aside for Elon Musk. I want to ask you a less sort of controversial question about him. Like there isn't, you aren't even bothered like a little bit that this guy who is a unelected billionaire who's sort of just going around rifling through, he's
doing more than
private information, people's social security information, just a lot of private information. Again, this is a guy who has business interests and some real reasons how he could use and abuse this information for his own purposes. You aren't even slightly bothered by the access that this guy is getting to highly privatized information and the fact that he's unelected. Like I think I always hear people predominantly on the right, whenever they have an issue with kind of like with the whole gerrymandering issue, one of the big things that I kept hearing largely in conservative circles was, well, you're going to have these unelected people deciding how district maps are drawn. And so you got a problem with unelected people deciding how district maps are drawn, but we have no problem with this unelected billionaire going around rifling through the private records of government entities in a fictional government agency that he works for. It's not even like a real government. The Department of Government Efficiency is like not a real thing. Like it's not even.
First of all, whatever they are looking at, those suggestions are being brought to the heads of those agencies or the head of the cabinet position that oversees those, and they make the final call one way or the other.
Sure. But
if you're talking about the privacy of people's information.
But my question is,
I'm as bothered by that as I'm bothered by the Bank of America, the Biden administration having forcing the censorship on the different people that disagreed as far as the pandemic.
So the answer is yes, you're bothered by it.
I'm bothered by the misuse of any private information from anybody, especially like the Bank of New York or
I don't believe you.
Turning over the information of people buying guns or where they're spending their money and turning that into the Biden administration back when they were rifling through a lot of the transactions of conservative. Yes, I'm bothered by both.
Let's agree then. We're all bothered by private business interests meddling in the privacy information of American citizens. So I'll concede to you that if those things that were going on in the Biden administration, troubling, should be equally as troubling as what Elon Musk is doing now. So what I'm hearing you say is that you are equally bothered by what Elon Musk is doing as you were those things you just highlighted.
If we're talking about invading other people's privacy and their financial records and so on, yes, I am. But if you're looking at the individual government institutions and making the determination as to where there's glut, there's bloat, there's all kinds of inefficiencies, and you're rooting that out, I'm all in favor of that. Nobody.
Well, then why aren't our Congress people doing that versus Elon Musk?
Well, that's the question I've had all along. I mean, you go back to Clinton, and they got rid of like 475,000 federal workers during his term because they looked at those and gave them buyouts. Nobody complained about that. But if you look at the efficiencies of our federal government, I think one of the things, and this is probably a topic for another day, why are all these individual cabinet positions and these agencies all located in Washington, D.C.? Why isn't the Department of Energy in, say, Texas, where the oil fields are? Why is the Department of Agriculture out in the cornfields of Nebraska, Kansas?
Because it makes more sense to centralize your government
and
agency.
Have the cabinet position there, but the regulatory agencies, the individual regulators, should be out among the people and getting the information from the people that they regulate in order to get that information.
I'm sure they travel, Kevin.
Yeah, you can have the cabinet heads and the basic home office if you want, but the individual workings of that agency should be out among the people.
How do you know they're not?
What's going on? Because when you're talking about we want to talk about unelected people, look at the unelected bureaucrats that are making a lot of these rules and regulations when they really don't, where they don't really have a finger on the pulse of what is going on.
How do you know?
What?
How do you know?
Because you look at the individual regulations that they have. And I have a problem with our Congress abdicating that authority to them. And that's why I think
work
that
for the federal government.
one of the programs that should be put in place is something called the REINS Act.
Those
the REINS Act
work
basically
for the
says,
government. That's their job.
They're government workers.
They're government workers. That's their job. And we don't need DOGE.
and they think that they run everything and not the elected officials.
We've already got the GAO. That's the Government Accountability Office. That is their job. They do it well.
Again, more bureaucrats. Hang on a second. Somebody's at my door. But if you guys
want to call them that, that's their career federal workers. I mean, I would trust it. I'll tell you what, I trust those career bureaucrats and China with my data more than Elon Musk.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Way more than Elon Musk. I would rather be
hang on a second
and give it to China than allow Elon Musk and Trump and whatever they're trying to do to get my information any day of the week. So I'll just have to deal with the Chinese consequences, because to me, they seem like they way less severe than whatever Elon Musk, who is a Bond villain, is cooking up for us.
I'll take it a step further. I have given my personal information. I've made orders from Temu and Shein very recently.
Yeah.
I have given the Chinese government my information.
Oh, we know
and
that.
I trust them way more than if I were to meet Elon Musk today and he asked me for my phone number, I wouldn't give it to him.
I wouldn't give him nothing.
Hey, look, man, the cat is already out of the bag. They got dossiers on all of us, man. It's too late. It's too late for that. They've been mining our information for years. Hey, one thing, I don't know if this is, again, I don't know if this is real or not, but I just saw this on Twitter. I just saw on Donald Trump's Twitter account that he said he was going to be signing an executive order getting rid of, here, let me read it exactly here because it's too funny. That's what I was laughing about. It says, I will be signing an executive order next week, ending the ridiculous Biden push for paper straws, which don't work. And then in all caps, he's written back to plastic. Like, this is what this man is spending his time, ladies and gentlemen, in the Oval Office worried about. Whether you drinking, whether you sipping out of a plastic or a paper straw. Now, I will agree with him. The paper straws are BS. They don't work. The paper straw, soggy after about a minute or two. He ain't lying about that. The paper straws are garbage. But the fact that this is what this man is tweeting about, when we've got way more serious issues to go around. I only mention it because I just think it's funny. And I saw it pop up in my Twitter feed and it just made me chuckle. And so I wanted the audience to be able to get the same sense of enjoyment out of that ridiculousness that I got, that this guy is just sitting back tweeting about plastic or paper straws, man. This is where we are.
I truly think that he's probably just scrolling through his now that he got Twitter back, he's scrolling through his Twitter timeline and seeing, because his algorithm is all far right foolishness. He's scrolling through his timeline and every single day he come up with a new executive order. Oh, they don't like them paper straws. Executive order. They don't like DEI. Executive order. They don't like what they don't like today. They don't like one ply toilet paper, executive order. Like it gets more ridiculous every day.
Well, I think there's some environmental issues and different lobbies behind all of that. The reason why there was a push to go to paper was because of the environment and plastic doesn't break down, and people are thinking about that kind of stuff. But people have to make their own decision about how important that is. But in general, he's a menace. I don't trust him or Elon, and we's in trouble. So we got to people of like minds have to band together in these dark days so we can get through this together without losing all of the civil rights and federal protections that people spent the last 50, 60 years trying to put in place. That's really what's at stake. I think Kevin had to roll. He didn't like that question about Elon. He was like, screw this. I'm out of here. But
because he had to admit that it was troubling. He's probably going to lose some listeners on his show for having to acknowledge that Elon Musk might be up to something nefarious back there, and that it's not good to have big money interests rifling through federal documents. And
could you imagine if Obama did something like this? Like if George Soros, right? They're always talking about him. If he was going through the government just on his own with his own little, merry band of 19-year-old, AI computer geniuses just going through government, man, these Republicans would it would be another January 6th. They would not stand for it. But somehow
they would call him treasonous, and
he said he was going to do this, so everybody just kind of sit around. But luckily, the Democrats, nonprofits, unions, people are filing suits right now and trying to push back, using the legal system. That's why judges are so important.
Absolutely, and they're generally the races that people pay the least attention to. Right. They get the least amount of coverage, in media during election times, and ideally they are our last line of defense, at least right now, and historically in terms of protecting our democracy and rights. And so people need to begin to pay more attention to the judges, particularly at the local level, because those are the judges who rise up through the ranks. So those are definitely things that we need to pay attention to. Hey man, on a funny note, thinking about that with Obama, imagining, what if Obama tweeted out, next week I'm signing an executive order banning black and blue suits so that every presidential candidate from now on has to wear a tan suit in the Oval Office. Just imagine if Obama had signed a ridiculous executive order like that, tan suits for every president, bring back tan suits. They raked him over the coals for wearing
he's a communist. This is not China, right? It would have been the worst thing. That small thing would have been an example of just how evil he is. He's a communist. He's trying to do. We lived through it, man. We know what they did with them. So to see how they're treating Trump is very, very funny. The hypocrisy is all I can say. But listen, folks, thank you so much. Anybody else got anything before we roll out of here? No? Raven, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Kevin, thanks for your time. Phil, you're out there, bro. Thanks for your time. Kevin G, thank you for your time as well. And you, the listeners, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. We'll be back next week, Tuesday and Friday at 1 p.m. More Hot Mic. And until then, have a good day.